All right, we're live. So I want to say ETM Hotep to those who will be watching, because I know we just went live and I'm quite sure that it's going to take a minute for anybody to tune in live with us. But if you're watching the archive, I want to say ETM Hotep, appreciate you um, watching our channel, and also subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and be informed when we go live and different topics that we actually cover. Well, tonight is Friday, and we normally do a Freestyle Friday. But for the past few Fridays, we've been kind of switching it up a bit and not doing the same Freestyle Fridays that we used to do. And because we've been doing that for quite a while, where we would demonstrate the 4 steps of the method of transliterating and translating. And we would take a picture and walk through it and demonstrate each of the 4 steps and give examples and walk through it. And we've been doing that for quite a while. So hopefully people can watch the archives and see how that's done. If you're new to what we do, but we also want to take time out on the Fridays just to have a different variety of topics and discussions. So tonight is just an open discussion, nothing prepared or pre-planned to discuss in terms of a presentation or a lecture. So this is not a lecture or a presentation. Just want to kind of have an open discussion, and anybody who's watching, and I'll see in the chat if we open it up, and if you want to come inside of the Hangout itself to be heard or be a part of the discussion, then let me know, and I'll make sure you get the link, and we can just continue with the discussion. So before we start, though, I would like to keep in our tradition now of reciting the offering formula before we actually begin. So I'll do that quickly. I'll just recite it, but there are many archives where we actually recite it and we show it as we're reciting it, and we've done a few hangouts where we've actually talked about the offering formula itself. So you can check our archives to review all of those. All right. But tonight I'm just going to recite it and give the English rough translation of it. All right. The offering formula, it goes: Hotep di Nasu, Wasir neb Jedu, Netra neb Abju, the F Peret Keru, Tihin Ket Kaha Apet Sesh Min Ket, Ket Nebet Neferet Wabet Anket Netra Im, Inkani Imaku Aku Ma Keru. And what that says is, an offering the king gives Osiris, Lord of Jedu, the great god, Lord of Abydos, so that he may give verbal offerings in beer, bread, ox, fowl, alabaster, and linen, everything good and pure on which a god lives, for the Ka of the revered ones, the ancestors who are justified. And when we recite that offering formula, the word Aku is the word for ancestors. Now, if you would like to incorporate this offering in your ritual or whatever it is that you do, you can always substitute the word Aku for an actual relative who has passed away or made his transition, his or her transition. All right, so you can replace the word Aku with the person's name. So Inkani Imaku, and then the person's name, and then you say Ma'a Keru if it's a male, and Ma'at Keru if it's a female. All right, so just remember that. But we always like to start off with that offering formula. In ancient times, it represents, in so many words, it represents trickle-down economics, where the king is reassuring that the order and rule of the kingdom is in such a way that the offering tables are always plentiful, and that the different necharu would grant the deceased to be able to partake in the offerings. All right. And there's a lot of figurative and expressions going on. So it's not that these things are literally done, or there's some, this bodily type of force floating around in the sky that's going to be grabbing a bowl of food and eating it, and drinking and things like that, or whatever the case is. All right, so hopefully that's clear. And in fact, that's actually one of the things, like I said, tonight is we're having an open discussion, but that's actually one of the things that I want to bring up for tonight, a discussion about the lack of understanding in figurative expressions, that people have. And I think it comes from, and I've seen a whole lot of it, and I've seen it for quite a while. I mean, not just recently. Recently, it's been a lot of talks about it because there's been a few events where people of different, I guess, traditional backgrounds are asking questions of each other, and they're not having an understanding of the person's system, traditional system, cultural system, and so forth. So there's questions that are coming up that are based on the questionnaires perspective, and not actually just coming with a clean slate to actually learn from the other person. And that's kind of been going on a lot lately, particularly with the Hebrew Israelites that I've seen asking questions, and vice versa, of people who deal with ancient Egypt. So it's like there's a Israelite Egyptian back and forth going on, and every now and then it gets a little bit more intense. We've seen it a couple of years back, I believe 2 years ago, with an event that they've called Kemet on Trial, and then recently an event where it seems like a Kemet on Trial Part 2, but it's not what it was called. But the kind of same things were being discussed and going back and forth. All right, and when I observe things like that, to me, it's just very clear that there's very little consideration of figurative language, figurative expressions, and how that's done in a particular tradition or culture or community. And it takes a while to really learn that from a culture. I can't take my figurative systems that I understand and within my culture and then project that on another culture. That would be wrong for me to do. And I would be handicapped. I wouldn't have a really good understanding of that culture. All I would be doing is taking that culture and just putting it up under mine, and then trying to interpret everything based on how I see my own. And that's very shallow, and that creates problems. And that's what has been going on a lot, and you can tell by the questions and things. So lately, what I've been doing is I've been trying to encourage people. Well, not lately, I've been doing this for quite a while, but as the conversation intensifies and more people talk about it, then I will talk about it a little more. So it seems like it's something that I'm just now doing, but this is something that I've done all along, and that is I try to encourage people to slow down and wipe, empty your cup, wipe the slate clean, and actually engage a foreign culture or alien culture that is not your own. And in doing so, then you'll have a more appreciation for the culture, a more understanding for the culture, and any questions that you have that you can come up with will be more informative. They'll come from an informed position than more so than an ignorant position, um, or even a misconstrued or projecting or bias type of position. And so that's why I encourage, because it goes on too much, and I see that. And lately, there's been a lot of questioning about the realness of the Egyptian deities or characters, even biblical characters, in terms of on the side of those who follow Abrahamic traditions, the biblical characters or the Quranic characters. They share the same characters. So I'm just gonna say Abrahamic characters. those characters, people are questioning the realness of them, if they actually existed. Um, did the people think that they existed? Did the people think that they're real? Are they figurative in any way or whatnot? And likewise with ancient Egypt, people are questioning, are the Egyptian gods real? Were they actually human beings at one point, or entities that walked around and whatever, or they just figurative and symbolic and all that? So a lot of that's been going on lately, and it's going to continue to go on because it's not something new. I mean, I've been dealing with this for a while, and I see the exact same questions, the exact same responses, and it's just like clockwork. And so I to change it, to change that cycle, that endless cycle, is I tell people to take some time out, study figurative expressions in general first. Various different literary devices that are used, figurative expressions, figurative language. Study language itself.
I got
Not
something. Excuse me.
uh-huh.
Yes, I have something I want to share on the figurative language if we get a chance.
Okay, you have something you mean share as far as your screen? You talking about as far as your screen?
To you.
Okay, yeah. All right. I'll just pass this to you in 1 second. Um, so what I was saying is that I've encouraged people to just stop and study figurative language in general, and language in general, not any specific language per se. I encourage that as well. Learn, more than another language other than your mother tongue, your mother language. I definitely encourage that as well. But study language, period. Communication, you know, to know what language actually is, and how, what is it? What is it that we're calling language itself? And I think that if people started to do that and take the time to study that, then a lot of the circular questions that keep coming up, and so on and so forth, misunderstandings, the back and forth, the arguments, that leads into all these other things, cascade of different things that we see today, will be eliminated. And then we can actually make some progress, you know, with the information, because there's a whole lot to learn and sift through. Because a lot of people will, on one hand, they'll complain about people who study the past, you know, um, history, period, whether it's ancient or modern history, but still in the past. People will complain about that because they say, well, it doesn't put food on my table, it doesn't put money in my pocket and stuff like that. They want the here and now, what's going on right here, right now. And so there's complaints about people who study that history and everything. Um, but at the same time, people don't realize that we benefit from historical things in the past, whether we benefit directly or indirectly, or other groups of people benefit from it. We are affected by it, and so we need to take time to study this stuff properly, so that we can sift through it all and then find out what is applicable, what's usable, what's not, and then use that which is applicable, and then put on the shelf that which is not applicable, because maybe it'll be applicable later or maybe not. But in order to even know that much, we have to engage the history, ancient history, and things like that in a proper way. So those are the things that I encourage. And all of this talk about the different gods, and whether hundreds of thousands of people in a geographical location called Kemet, if any one of those people were gay or not, or did this happen in Kemet and stuff. I think those are reactionary arguments by people who are reacting to another side of people who like to romanticize things. And so both sides, people who romanticize things and people who are responding to that, are still, when it's all said and done, there's no progress made because there's just so much to be done. And I think that people need to really reevaluate and approach the study differently, different approach. And you're not going to learn about a culture on the street corner. You're not going to learn about a culture in the rap style, rap battle style debating that we see, or YouTube, these quick YouTube presentations and shows that people are doing. You're not going to learn a culture that way. It takes time to learn a culture. You got to take it slow. You got to slow roast it and engage in it. So these are all the things that I encourage. But Antoine, you said you wanted to share something, so I'll just pass on the mic over to you. And if you got something on your screen, I'll lock it on your screen.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and pull up on my screen, and I'll be quick. But
let me know when to lock it on your screen. You have it up now?
Yeah, it should be up.
All right, there you go.
Okay, yeah, basically, kind of goes back to what you were stating as far as understanding the culture and understanding some of the ambiance. But in the book, The Dawning Moon of the Mind, Unlocking the Pyramid Text by Susan Moreau, she states like puns and riddles depend on concealed meaning in a double sense that opens up a word or a phrase, the way a hidden spring opens a box, revealing what is within. Indeed, this is what hieroglyphics themselves are all about. The astonishing, naturalistic, hieroglyphic compromise of pyramid text belong to the realm of empirical observation that is the basis of both science and poetry. They are both things and metaphors arising from the astute observation of the intrinsic qualities of things. This is what embedded written language to develop. Abstraction developed from metaphors, as Emerson wrote. Language is fossil poetry. I just want to share this just to kind of reiterate what you stated. When people don't make the mental connections to the culture and don't learn the paronymities of the culture, and so basically, what they try to do is, in their attempt to understand the culture, they lay the information over what they already know, and what doesn't connect, they try to throw out. And stuff that does connect, they'll keep it. That's where you have some people who understand the Haru and Seth and the Mary and Jesus. They can understand that connection, but other things that they don't connect to, they try to throw out or try to make false claims as far as as stated, as far as this nature was living, or as far as like you said, can't prove things, homosexuality rate and all those type of crazy things.
Yeah, well, that's a good addition to what I was saying, because that's exactly right. And we see it all the time. And like how you said, when something doesn't fit, then there's a sense of uncomfortableness, and then you have to make it feel comfortable, so people will project their biases on whatever it is that's being discussed or examined and whatnot. And like I said, I always just encourage people to there's a sense of there's a overwhelming adversarial climate that we see on social media. Like, nobody can deny that. And I am against that. I don't condone it, and I don't partake in it. And because what it does, it sets up this contention between two sides all the time, and everything is adversarial. You can't have a conversation without somebody being defensive or somebody trying to outdo you in some form or fashion, or vice versa. There's always a competitive, it's like a over exaggeration of competitiveness and this adversarial type of thing going on. Competition is good if it's done properly and it's healthy. Too much of any one thing could and often do result in bad consequences or bad results. And that's just no different than what we're seeing. People are polarizing things, either or, instead of walking and chewing gum at the same time. You either got to walk, and if you want to chew gum, you got to stop walking and chew your gum. Once you stop chewing your gum, now you can start walking again. That's how it seems like people are treating a lot of these different things, the different topics. And I'm speaking in general, all the way across the board. Not anything is specific, but that all that stuff has to change, because it's detrimental to any progress that we think that we're going to be making and things like that. So, when it comes to ancient Kemet, I always tell people to slow it down. People ask me questions and things, my inbox, email, whether it's the language or the culture itself or something related to the ancient Kemet. A lot of times their question is overshooting itself. It's like the cart is out there before the horse, even in the question. And it's not to say that something is bad by that, but I just try to inform people of what it is that they're doing, and then encourage them to switch it up when people do stuff like that. So I always take things slow, because sometimes a question, a lot of times the question is more important than the answer, because a question is to what do you call it, to facilitate an answer. Like the quality of your question usually dictates the quality of the answer and the response. So if your question is shallow, your question is nonsensical, your question is messed up, then the answers given can only be but so much. And so if we're ever to make progress and stuff like that and really learn some things, then we got to make sure that we are, proficient at asking informed questions that's going to bring about the proper response, the proper answer that, people are looking for, or whoever is asking the question is actually looking for. So this is why you see me do that all the time, especially on Facebook or social media. Then when people ask questions, I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's some problems with the question itself. Some questions are unanswerable the way that they're asked. And then you don't want to assume what people are trying to ask. So you try to get them to reword the question, or you have to show how the question as they worded it is unanswerable and things like that. And if people are really concerned and they really want to know some stuff, then they'll listen. They'll take heed. They'll they understand what you're saying. They understand that you're not being an adversary. They're not taking it the wrong way personally and thinking that you're doing X, Y, and Z, because they are sincerely interested in the information, and if you have it or not. And if you do, share it. If you don't, then point in the right direction where they may be able to find it. Or if you absolutely just don't know, just say, I don't know. That always works. But yeah, but that's what's been taking place a lot, and that's what I've seen, and I've been kind of responding to. And if you notice on Facebook, at least, I've been posting a few pictures of different Necharu, Egyptian deities, and along with it, I just have this simple message. I say, if I have to argue back and forth with somebody, and just to convince them that this particular picture or depiction of a god, Egyptian god, is a figurative expression and not to be taken literally, then that person is not ready to have any worthwhile or beneficial conversation about that deity or whatever the case is. And the reason why I keep saying that, and I posted a few of those up, is because it's just a simple statement of you have to crawl before you can walk. Like I can't teach a person calculus if they don't even know their addition. They don't know how to add or subtract. It'd be very, very hard for me to teach advanced mathematics, trigonometry, advanced calculus, and all these other things if they don't even have the basics down. So that's the meaning behind the post. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I can show you this depiction of this deity, and you look at it and you think that it's supposed to be taken literal, and I tell you that it's not, and then I have to sit here and argue with you to convince you of that, then you're definitely not ready to have any further conversation about it until we work on that first. You know what I'm saying? So that's the meaning behind those few posts that, if anybody y'all, and if any of you all are watching, have seen me post up inside of a couple of Facebook groups. That's the motive behind me putting that up there, is to remind people that, look, just because you are able to talk about something doesn't mean that you should, and that there are steps to this. There are levels to this, just with anything. And we have to remember, culture is a very complex thing. It's made up of many components, many parts. And to try to just in a shallow way to talk about this and that, it does us no good. It's just going to perpetuate the misunderstanding. And it's going, next year we're going to have a criminal trial part 3. The year after that, criminal trial part 4, part 5. Almost like what was the movies? Jason movies. How many Jason movies came out? Wasn't it 9? Friday the 13th part 9 or whatever. I mean, that's how many of these things are going to keep happening, until we actually pump the brakes and address the elephant in the room, So anyway, that's just what I've been encouraging a lot. And I just see that, and it's just so right there staring at us in our face, how people are projecting their ideas from whatever they're conditioned by their belief system or whatever the case is, over on other cultures and other things. And we just can't do that. That's just not scientific, and you have no benefits in doing that whatsoever. So, like, and I'm gonna give you an example. There are certain words that are highly polarized. That if mentioned, that it just opens like a Pandora's box. As example, God, God. That's one word that can be taken so many different ways, can mean so many different things to different people based on their cultural conditioning or whatever they subscribe to. You have a word like spirit, a word like spiritual. What else? A word like religion. A word like soul. And it's probably a whole bunch of other words I could think of if I take time to think of, but those are the ones that come to the top of my head where it's just very it's just swimming in ambiguity if not properly defined based on whatever cultural codes that you're dealing with, so but it goes back to understanding how language works as well. That would actually definitely help out if people understood how language actually works and what is an actual word. What is a word? Like, we use words all the time, but we never really take time out to understand what a word actually is. What is it? And then, go from there to what is language and communication. How are we able to communicate? What is the speech community? How are we able to understand one another, even though we're not telepathic and things like that? So these are and that kind of gets into a little bit of cognitive sciences, cognitive linguistics and other cognitive sciences, kind of deal with that a little bit to have a better understanding. But a lot of this is just not taken serious, or it's just neglected, and then people have a misunderstanding. Mention God, Egyptian gods. Like, what is a god to the Egyptians? And then, and then I'll see, like, if you ask that question, then I'll see somebody say, well, the Egyptians never used the word God. And I can tell that person who says that, and not to say that they would mean anything bad by it, but you could just tell that a person that says that or something like that, they don't understand what a word actually is. Because to say the Egyptians didn't use the word God, you're not really saying what you think you're saying. You're just saying that the Egyptians didn't have that shape or that form, God, in their lexicon or their vocabulary. But you don't know about the word. And, because if you don't understand what a word is and what it's composed of and everything, then, you really don't know what you're saying. So that's why I said a little bit of study into that will kind of alleviate or eliminate those kinds of problems like that. And it'll give us a better understanding of what people mean when they say what they say, in terms of today and, in ancient times, historical times, other cultures, foreign cultures, and things like that. But anyway, so I don't want to keep on rambling on, but I think that that's one of the main things that that I've been addressing. And I do want to, let me just read this. I'm going to read this because this is something that I just keep repeating over and over again. I might just do a little small, short blog post on it so that I don't have to keep repeating myself. And I'll be able to just provide a link to it, if I ever want to go over it. But I just want to read this. This is something that I've been kind of repeatedly saying. And I'll just read this because it ties into what I'm saying. Then I'll just pass the mic, open the floor up. Anybody else has anything to add on and whatnot. But I'll just read this. This is something I posted on Facebook. So I said, language itself is a mental construct. It's an illusion. So what do I mean by that? So I say, take, for instance, nouns, what people understand to be nouns, or substantives, or as people say, substantives. So if you take a noun or a substantive, the word, like the word house, let's just take the English word house. Whether you see it written or you hear it spoken, the word house, like I said, whether you see it written on paper or whether you hear somebody say it, like I just did, house, it's not the house itself. So in that sense, that's why language is an illusion. Because if I say house, me saying it and you hearing it is not the actual house itself. All right. So what that is, whether you see it written or hear it spoken, what you're dealing with is the physical form, which is part of what's called a sign or a word. All right. And so what you're hearing or what you're seeing, if I say house, or if I wrote it down on paper, is that you're dealing with a signifier, and that signifier points to a signified, which is the mental construct or the mental conceptualization of the referent, what it actually refers to. So when I say the word house, that is not the house itself, but it triggers a mental conceptualization of what an actual house is in your mind. Okay. So now both this mental conceptualization, which is the signified, and the form or the shape, whether you heard me say it or saw it written on paper, those two things are joined together and they're linked together by a third element, and it's called a sign. Okay. And these signs is what we're calling words. That's what people are trying to call words. And these mental signs that we all walk around with in our heads is shared by various different people. And those people who share these signs understand one another. And we call that a speech community. So everybody who's part of the same speech community, what that means is a speech community is a group of people that have the same mental lexicon. They're walking around with the same dictionary in their head of these signs. And remember, a sign is the marriage between the signified, which is the mental construct, or conceptualization, and the shape, whether it's spoken or written. Either way, the marriage of those two things is a sign, is what is composed of, what sign is composed of. And because we walk around with the same signs, I can understand you. Every word that I'm saying right now, for those who are listening to me, the reason why you can understand me is because you share the same signs as I do. And we call that a speech community. And we just happen to label ours English, the language that we're speaking, English, which has its, sets of rules and things like that. So anyway, so that's what I'm saying. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because when we understand that, then we move over from that to figurative expressions, figurative language. What that is the masterful manipulation of what I just described. It's the play on that, on these signs. Whether you're separating the shape from the mental conceptualization for a brief moment to create a derivative sign, or playing around with the sign itself. But figurative expression is a masterful manipulation of that. All right. And this is something that we did and we still do to this very day. But in ancient times and historical times, it was done a whole lot more because there was no writing. So everything had to be memorized. And there had to be ways to document and memorize all of these different signs that people walked around in their heads. So they had to figure out ingenious ways to play around with that. And that's what we call figurative language or figurative expressions today. All right. So now, once everybody understands that, then what I added to that is the fact that many of the deities in all these indigenous cultures around the world, what they are, they're ontological and taxonomic categorical labels serving as mnemonic devices for a package or container or a box of various related concepts. Now, that may be a mouthful, but basically what I'm saying is that the deities of these various different cultures, they are labels. They become words that are labels for the containers or boxes that people use to classify things. Because when you're dealing with ontology and taxonomy, you're dealing with classification. All right. Taxonomy is basically the science of classifying things. It's usually used for biological entities. You have biological taxonomy, dealing with biological evolution and things like that. Like why we call felines, why we call lions, jaguars, cougars, cheetahs, and all these different creatures, animals, we can group them together and call them feline. But then they have specific differentiations that will call them something else, but they'll be grouped together and classified as feline. Same thing with dogs and foxes and things like that. We'll classify those as canine, or I believe it's lepus or lupus. Anyway, taxonomy is more familiar when it comes to biological entities and evolution and things like that. But it's also done every day, all the time. Like our computer hard drives are an expression of taxonomy, because all we do is we have root directories, subdirectories, folders. We put all our pictures in one folder, label the folder, whatever it is. And usually you'll put everything that's related in one folder, all the individual things. But like, let's say you took a trip to Disney World and you took a whole bunch of pictures at the trip of Disney World. Each picture is unique in and of itself, but you group all the pictures in a folder on your computer called Disney World, and you may give it a date or whatever the case is, but you're able to do that. So those are classification. And ontology deals with, the classification of existence and to determine what exists versus what doesn't exist and things like that. But I would suggest you look up these terms and read more about it. But I'm just giving you a gist. So this is the things that I'm saying. So that's what these deities, a lot of these deities represent. They represent labels to classify things that are related, like a file folder system. And until this is understood, people who try to read different texts of different cultures and things like that, that's foreign to them, or unknown to them, they will be confused and perplexed. And it's because of that confusion and perplexity that people will just ask, kind of nonsensical questions, because they don't take the time out to really understand that point of what these deities are to the culture that they're, asking about and things. But you'll find that most of the indigenous cultures, when they talk about gods and these different deities, that's what they're doing. They're categorical labels for what they observe in existence, in their surroundings, whatever the case is, natural phenomenon that's observed. And natural phenomenon doesn't always mean like weather, like things that you can see, like rain, thunder, lightning, and stuff like that. Natural phenomena could be things that occur, within nature, that you actually observe in nature, like outdoors type nature, or the nature of being itself, the nature of the human being, uh, like our ability to do what I just said, our ability to see the external similarities of individual things and group them together. That's a cognitive ability to do that. We have to have the ability to do that, to see similarities. And we, like, for example, we grow up as young children playing games, Pictionary games, or match, these different match, where you got to turn a card over or turn something over. You'll see what the picture is, and then you got to find the match somewhere else. If you don't find it, you got to flip the card back over, and then the next person goes. And so our ability to match things and to know where those things are, those are different cognitive abilities that we have. And so that's a phenomenon that could be categorized and even deified if it's deemed important to the people in the culture. All right. So anyway, those are some of the things that I said. I didn't read my whole post, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there. That these are the things that I've been pushing, and been pushing for a long time, but it will continue to push until people actually get it. They have to actually slow down and understand that what these deities and things represent. They have to understand these things. And I do intend on having a larger conversation connecting ontology, taxonomy, and cosmogony all into one nice conversation, where you'll be able to see how it applies when studying these different cultures, especially these African cultures.
I had a question about that post. If you can hear me, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah. In that post, I think you referenced like 3 different authors. Allen, I know Allen was one, and then I think Hurt was another one. But my question, I didn't get a chance to, because I was going to take some time. You just posted like earlier today, I believe. I was gonna take some time to try to look at those different authors and see what the books you were referring to, or if those books even have more information related to the topic from those 3 authors that you quoted.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I quoted, it was Allen, it was Dunnan, and it was also Hart. And really, I only quoted a section out of that, out of those particular things to emphasize the point, because you have, and that's another thing that probably goes into a whole nother topic, but it's another thing that like a couple of years ago, people that used to come on Facebook and YouTube and stuff, they would just say anything. They would just make claims and just, give their opinion, which everybody's entitled to, but they would give it, and then that's it. And that's not very not very meaningful if you're just, giving your opinion and not, kind of showing anything to support it or whatever the case is. So then, as time goes on in the social community, I've seen people get better, and they start to support the things that they say with somebody who agrees with them preferably a scholar who wrote a book. And so because a scholar who wrote a book agrees with what they're saying, or vice versa, then they'll start quoting scholars, or they'll start citing scholars, their book titles or pages and things like that. And that's better than just saying things without, you know, without any corroboration or whatever the case is. You know, you're not offering anything. You're just real shallow with it. That's better. But that's still not where we need to be. You know, and I say that because once people get too comfortable with that, then we just become regurgitators, and all you are doing is repeating what scholars write, and you're not creating knowledge. You're just repeating whatever it is that you've come across. And a lot of times people don't do full literature review. They don't do an exhaustive literature review for a particular topic that they are engaging with anyway. So a lot of times when people cite authors, they're only going to cite someone based on their limited or shallow review. So I asked another question the other day. I asked the question, I said, and I gave a scenario. I said, if you are a researcher and you're researching something, let's just say it could be anything, but you're researching something, and you find a book written by scholar A, and scholar A says this. It says, whatever he says. Then on the same subject, you come across another book written by scholar B. Scholar B says something opposite to scholar A, but it's about the same subject that you're researching. And so I asked the question, based on that scenario, I asked the question, what should the researcher do, or what can the researcher do at that point? Like, here you are, you have two scholars. Let's just say they have PhDs. Let's give them the highest rank of respect. They have a PhD and they are experts in that field. Scholar A and scholar B. Scholar A and scholar B both have expertise and PhDs in that field, but they're saying two opposite things. And you, as a researcher, you come across both of their works. What can you do at that point?
I'll say what I would do. Now, unless someone else wants to chime in.
Now, go ahead. It's open. I'm just asking a question. I asked this online, but I'm curious to know what you all think.
Oh, okay, yeah. So what I would do is basically, I would try to find, if it's just those two arguments to stand in that field, I would initially try to find other individuals who support one of the two arguments. Then in that case, if I couldn't find any supporting evidence from any other authors or scholars, then what I would do is I would write a review on both of the two ideas, and then I would say which one I supported the most and provide evidence that I have found that correlates on why I support that one that I do support. Or if they both stay hand to hand, I would just present it as they both are. I haven't made a decision, and if anyone else had anything to offer, I would be open to that.
Okay, now let me just tell you what. I mean, that's good. Like, because there were some responses on that when I asked that question. There was a couple of responses, and I think one of the responses kind of fits to what you just said. But at the end of I waited for responses. I was just curious to see what people would say. But then after time went by, I just went ahead and put what I feel is the most important thing to do. And one other person agreed, said the same thing as I did. When you're confronted with that scenario, what you're going to have to do in order to understand or get to the truthfulness or the correctness of an issue is that at that moment, you are required to learn the methodology, and you have to engage the data or evidence yourself. That's the only way that you can resolve, because remember the scenario, you got two PhD scholars that are saying the opposite things. So they are experts in the field. And because you yourself are not an expert in anything, you're just a researcher. You're just trying to find out information about, X, Y, and Z. And so here you have scholar on your left hand side saying this, and scholar on your right hand side saying this. Now you don't know who's right. The only way you're gonna even remotely figure that out is that now you have to learn the methods that's relevant to the issue, and you have to do the work yourself. You have to engage the work. You have to engage the data. You have to engage the evidence yourself, and do what it is that they do. And see, people don't want to really do that or have time to do that. I'm not gonna say that they don't want to, but a lot of people don't have time to do it, or you know, they neglect doing it. And so what happens is that we end up just being regurgitators. And so now let's take the same scenario. Suppose I was researching something and I only read scholar A. Then when I teach the next man, let's say I'm teaching you, or I'm sharing some information with you, Antoine. So I look into this issue. I research this issue. I only read scholar A because scholar A has a PhD. He's deemed as an expert in the field. When I come share this with you, now I'm just going to regurgitate what scholar A said. But here you have over here scholar B sitting over there. I just don't know about him yet. I just didn't read his book or anything like that. I just read scholar A. So where does that put you? Now what I've done, I've passed on information to you that has not been rigorously reviewed or unpacked. Now all I'm doing is regurgitating something. And it appears to be correct because, we have a tendency to appeal to authority. He has a PhD. He's deemed as an expert, and so on and so forth. So now what I'm getting at, what I say all that to say is that we have so much work to do. We have to become the engagers of the evidence now. We can't be content with just repeating what scholars are saying, especially when it comes to African history, African phenomenon. Why is that? Because a lot of what's been said so far and these different fields of study have been dominated by non-Africans. And that's cool if the non-African domination is talking about non-African phenomena. I mean, that's just understood. But there's a sense of there's a problem there, that Africans themselves are looked at as marginal. They're on the margins. They're over there on the margins. They're treated marginally, or the work or their voice is treated marginally. And the different scientific fields and so on and so forth are dominated by non-Africans. And like I said, that's all fine and dandy when it comes to non-African issues and non-African phenomenon. But the best voice to have about African issues would be Africans, especially the experts among the Africans, so that they can put their input into the pot and support whatever it is that they say, and project and push out there, or whatever the case is. So we have to take time to start engaging the information. And I say this because you brought up my post where I quoted those three authors. I quoted those three authors because that sets people comfortable who are simply regurgitators. They just regurgitate what other scholars are saying. And that's fine, because that doesn't speak to whether the scholar is right or wrong. But the point is, you won't know that until you become a person that engages the information, engages the evidence, engages the data, or not. Otherwise, you run the risk and you open yourself up to be vulnerable to just pass on information and be a regurgitator of information that could possibly be wrong or incomplete. And so we have a lot of work to do. To raise ourselves up beyond regurgitators, beyond citationists. People now, citation has become popular, and that's a good thing. So I don't want to sound like I'm knocking citations, because citations is way better and it's a good thing to do. It's a proper thing to do, and you should do that. And that's way better than people who just saying anything and don't cite a thing. It is coming off out the blue, just making up something just because it sounds good. You know, they're not demonstrating any type of knowledge, competence, proficiency in any subject whatsoever. Not they don't prove that they did literature review. That they don't prove that they are competent of what scholars are saying, whether it's contradictory of each other or not. At least if I read scholar A and scholar B, and I was sharing this with you, Antoine, then I'll be able to say, well, hey, scholar A says this, scholar B says this. At least I'm able to fairly pass that to you. And then you can decide in your head, like, okay, daggone, so what? So who's right? And then you can take on the study of the method and engage it directly yourself. But if I come to you and I'm only quoting scholar A, and I'm showing and I'm saying this as you know, as a matter of factly type of way, then I'm doing you a disservice. You see, so we have to step it up. We have to step it up. I know I've been going on. I'm trying to I mean, the floor is open. Look, I've been doing a lot of the talking, but the floor is open. So if anybody has something to say, I'm going to check out this chat thing, see if I can see if anybody had comments or questions. And hold up, how much room do we have? We got 1, 2, 3, 6, 4. We have 4 slots inside the Hangout itself. So if you're interested in coming in the Hangout itself, let me know in the chat right now, and I'll post the link up. All right, because I don't want to. Well, I won't be staying on too long, but like I said, it's an open discussion, so you know you're more than welcome. Anybody can come on in and let their voice be heard. But I'm gonna kind of scroll back right now, see if I can find anything to address or mention. But let me say hotep to everybody who's listening and tuned in. Appreciate everybody's tuned in, because when when you first start, there's nobody here. So just now looking, I see quite a few people. So shout out to everyone who's watching. I would do a roll call, but you know, like I said, I don't want to be here too long. So let's see. The best metal nature speaker in the building. Peace and love with y'all. Garfield, hotep, brother Garfield. Garfield is laying it down, man. Listen, let me say something. Garfield, man, look, I'm gonna say this to Garfield. I'm gonna say this publicly for the record, on the record, and let the record show that all the stuff. See, I've seen Garfield on Facebook, and not just Garfield, but Garfield and other members of his team, the Dagger Squad, the brother Allen, and some others. I'm not quite sure who all the members are, but anyway, but as far as Garfield, I've seen him deal with biblical issues, you know, Hebrew issues, biblical issues, and Christian issues, you know, Abrahamic issues. And he's been putting forth a lot of information over the past, you know, months and you know, for the past year at the very least. And so I'm going to say this again. I told him this before, and I'm saying, I am telling you, the brother needs to write a book. The brother needs to organize that information and put it in a book to where, you know, you're addressing certain issues. You know, you name the issue or whatever style, you know, you put it in, but it needs to be done because, you know, like the brother Unc always says, a well-organized lie will defeat a disorganized truth every time. So until we organize the information, organize the truth, then all these misinformation stuff floating around, it's always gonna seem like it's winning. You know what I'm saying? So you know, so I want to say that to the brother Garfield. I've said this, you know, all the time. Gotta put that stuff and organize it into a book, you know, to where we can just reference it and be, you know, like if I see somebody making this claim, and now I got a book to refer to that, okay, this claim was addressed. At least I'll know where we left off at, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It kind of reminds me, kind of like how the Magi Jonathan Owens did his book, where whenever something come up about the murder, I can reference his book, or you know, he got so much information in there. And I definitely agree, man. I have people tell me like they'll ask me something about Hebrew, and I'm like, you need to go watch this video by Garfield because I can't even touch it or give it the proper acknowledgement. So go ahead and check out this video that he presented.
Yeah, and plus put it in book form is a lot better because a lot of times we don't do it justice when we try to be real brief with stuff. Somebody asks a question, you on Facebook. Because a lot of times when I'm on Facebook, I'm multitasking. Like I'm not sitting on Facebook to be on Facebook. A lot of times, like I'm on Facebook because I'm rendering something or I'm multitasking in the first place. So it's like no one wants to sit there and hold a class, and that's why I always say you can't learn these things on social media. It has to be in a learning environment. But anyway, so by it being stuff being put in book form, man, you can refer to like, okay, look at chapter 2 of this book. If you want to know about this, look at chapter 2. It breaks down this and that, you know. Um, at least you'll have a point of reference to springboard off of, you know. So anyway, I don't know if Garfield's still listening because I'm scrolling through, but yeah, Garfield, man, I just want to put that on you. I'm gonna keep telling you over and over again till you produce a book about different issues. I mean, I know y'all cover a lot, man. Talking about the whole Levant, Middle East, the Israel, Judah. I mean, you talk about a whole lot of things. I mean, and then some people are part of the team. They focus on West Africa and the um, transatlantic slave trade and things like that. I mean, really, man, I would love to see that organized into a book. I'm telling you, that's the way to go. We got to do that. Got to do that. So, and then another thing about Garfield and his team, I see Monica and the brother with his team. I think the sister Cheryl, Monica, Garfield, and maybe some others. They also deal with financial and credit, financial issues. And I'll definitely be reaching out to you all on that because I got some things that I want to deal with as well. So anyway, all right, enough of that. But I'm trying to see was any questions. Am I missing questions? You all looking in the chat? It says, okay, Lisa asks, why do people keep saying we don't come from monkeys when no one ever said that? Yeah. Well, see, that's a classic straw man logical fallacy is basically when you mischaracterize what somebody's saying and then you argue against your made up mischaracterization. Nobody says we come from monkeys, but people will argue as if that's being said, and I think that's very silly and that's a waste of time. We got too much stuff to be doing to be wasting our time, so anyway, why do people do that? I don't know. I mean, it happens and it happens a lot. I don't think we can ever get rid of that, but we can kind of ignore it because sometimes ignoring works. You ignore something long enough, then people have to switch up because a lot of people do things for attention. Kick, scream, borrow, beg for attention. You ignore it, then just go away, or they have to force them to switch up. Second Ra Hotep, he says, I sure said the Remich never saw their divinities as God in the modern sense. I say it all the time. They were netter. The Orisha are called Orishas, not gods. Or maybe I'm wrong about that. See, that speaks to what I said earlier. What something is called is the shape or the form of a sign. Okay, let me just give an example. Let me go back to the word house that I was saying earlier. Okay. If I paint a picture in your mind, not a literal picture, but if I paint a picture in your mind of a rectangular enclosure that has walls and several rooms in it, it has furniture in it, it has a covering to shield from the weather, rain, and all that kind of stuff. The cover that's on top is slightly sloped. It has openings in the front and back, big enough to fit through. Um, and it has other openings that you can't walk through, but you could just has openings for, you know, some of the breeze and things to come in and stuff like that. What I'm painting a picture of is what English speakers will call a house. Okay, for the sake of my example, we would call that a house. But in your mind, you're conceiving what I just said. Now, that conceptualization is glued together with the utterance of that sequence of sounds, house. If I say house, that will cause your mind to recall the concept of that dwelling enclosure with a cover on top, you know, what I just described. All right. So hopefully you follow me. All right. Now, those two things glued together is what's called a sign. And you mentally, you walk around with these mental signs in your head. So now all I have to do is say the word house, and it will trigger the other side of the coin, which is the conceptualization of the enclosure. All right. And you know to do that because you and I share the same sign, because we speak the quote unquote same language. But now, let's say I walk among a different speech community, and we call that speech community Spanish. Now, if I say or utter the word house, it's not going to trigger anything because they don't have the same sign in their mind. I have to utter the sound sequence casa. Now it will trigger the same conceptualization that you did in an English environment if I say the word house. So among English speakers, I say house, that will trigger the concept. Among Spanish speakers, I have to say casa, and that will trigger the same concept. Now, once you have two different speech communities that can match concepts but have different shapes of the signifier of the signifier or the trigger, that's what we call translation. Now I can formulate an equation and say house equals casa. How do I know it equals casa? Or how do I know that they're equal? The reason why I know that they're equal is because both of those separate shapes trigger the exact same concept. So Spanish speakers have a different sign in their mind than an English speaker. And remember, a sign is made up of the concept and the shape glued together. And that is how and why we can translate anything, any language. If that was not so, then we would never be able to understand anybody that doesn't speak a language that you yourself didn't grow up and was raised in. We would be linguistically isolated from the rest of the world if that phenomenon did not exist. So I'm giving you an example. I'm not showing anything on the screen, but I'm giving you a verbal example and demonstrating what this phenomenon is, and how language actually works. So I say all that to say is that when you say that, or anybody, not just you, but when anybody says that the nature are not gods, you can't just say that and leave it like that. That's too shallow. That's not going anywhere. Everybody says that has no value. It it doesn't do anything. You have to actually go up under the hood and understand what we're actually saying, or what whoever is actually saying. So you have to figure out what are the signifiers and what are they signifying, and how is that linkage done? That's what you have to find out. This is why I always tell people to stop being afraid to use words. Like, people have wordophobia. Like, people don't want to use the word God. They say, oh, the word God is a German word. It means blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, I don't want to use it because the Africans never called their deities gods. But they never called them deities either. They never uttered that shape, that sequence of sound, deity, and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? So it gets real silly once you understand how language operates, and how we communicate, how, you know, how language works and things like that. So it's okay to say God if you can show that that shape or that sound sequence in that physical form, the shape, triggers the same concept. So you have to deal with the concepts. If you don't change the concepts, you could change the shape all day long, and you're still in the same boat. You're still in the same boat. You understand? So because you know, you could just replace the word. You could replace a word for something. And I'll just give you an example. The most prominent examples of what's called misnomers, right? Um, I guess the most popular misnomer that I know I can think of is driveway and parkway. Okay. We call a place where you park your car a driveway. Now I can look up the word drive in a dictionary. It's a verb and it means to travel, to move, you know, and to operate a vehicle and move it. That's driving. Drive, to drive. I could look up the word park. That's a verb, which means to come to a stop, to you know, take something and stop it. And you know, I'm not reading definition on my screen or anything. I'm just giving a rough definition. All right, from memory, the gist of it. So we know that drive and park, what they mean, you know, on their own. But yet here we are, we're calling a driveway a place where you actually park your car. And we call a parkway something that we actually drive our car on. It's the opposite. So just because you call something something doesn't make it so by itself. And so we could switch it. So I use that example because I'm saying that I can call a parkway a driveway, even though I call it that, it still remains what it is. And you know, the old saying, you know, a rose by any other name is still a rose. You know, you got all these different sayings out there that kind of demonstrate or express what I'm saying right now. And so we can't have these word phobias. We gotta go beyond the shallow surface of these words and things like that. You know, this coming from people who neglect to do that for whatever reason. You know, they could have good reasons for not doing it, but we have to really change that. We have to stop doing that. People saying this language is a bastard language, English is a language of confusion, it's a bastard language, this, that, and the other. It's like, come on now. Like, that's so 1980s. That's old. That's just outdated and wrong. You know, we got to go further. We got a lot of work to do. We got to go further with all this stuff, you know. So we can't have word phobias. Like, we should be able to use spirit. Now, you know, words are, like I said earlier, they're polarized and they have a lot of ambiguity in there, in them, depending on what context you're speaking. Like if I say God among a certain group of Christians, in their mind, that shape, that sound shape, physical shape, God, I utter God, that will trigger in their mind a concept of a man that came to earth, sent from his father, who lived for 33 years, died on the cross as a sacrifice for our sins, named Jesus Christ. You know, so it may trigger that among them. But if I walk among a bunch of Hebrew Israelites and I say God, it is not going to trigger the same thing that it did for the Christian group I just left. Even though I'm saying the same word, I'm using the same shape. You see, so there are certain words that are very, very highly polarized and confusing if you don't understand the context that you're in when you're using this stuff. So when you have places of convergence such as Facebook, where all these different belief systems and practices converge on one another and have these conversations, it's just all over the place. You got Hebrew Israelites that will say the word God, atheists that will say the word God, agnostics that will say the word God, different African tradition practitioners will say the word God, and everybody means something different. How can you have any productive conversation in that environment? You can't. So, you know, when you have a conversation about that, you got to define your terms. You got to define what a spirit is. You got to define what a soul is, define what God is before you start having a conversation about these things and using the terms. So that's all it takes. That's all it takes. You know, the Orisha are not called gods. No African anything is called anything English. You know, I mean, so I just see people say, you know, will say stuff like that. And it's like, it's a given. You know, it's a given. There's, you know, English has its signs, and different African languages have its signs. You just have to figure out mapping it out. What matches, even though the shapes are different, but it can match the concepts. You know, like the example I gave, casa and house. They point to the same concept. Like I can say the word elephant. The word elephant is not an elephant itself. The word elephant is just a physical shape, physical form. We call sounds, a sequence of sounds. Elephant. If I write it on paper, it'd be a sequence of graphemes or graphs. You would just see it in a sequence of characters on a sheet of paper. Elephant. But neither the sequence of characters on paper or the sounds I make out of my mouth, elephant, is the actual elephant itself. It's just not. But if I say it, elephant, it will trigger in your mind a large gray looking creature with 4 legs, big old ears, a long snout, and, you know, whatever else. It triggers that. In ancient Egyptian, I would say Abu. It means the same. It points to the same thing. What English speakers will call an elephant. And that's what I just did, is elephant equals Abu. That's a translation. I'm translating. When you take a source language, you bring it over into a target language. You bring in the meaning. Translation is a semantic endeavor. You're bringing a meaning of something from a source language over into a target language. So you're matching concepts. And you're just identifying the equation of the shape, but the concepts are the same. So the concept is the large gray animal with 4 legs and large snout. Those match, but the shape differs. In an English environment, among English speaking community, I would say elephant. Among an ancient Egyptian community, I would say Abu. Like I did with the house. Casa, house. But anyway, so, hey, I've been hogging the mic for a long time. Now, y'all know MC Iron Lung, boy. So, y'all jump in there now. Like I said, hold up. Let me look down. Did anybody want to come in here? I'm still on Sekim's comment, man. Hotep Strife, imagining a noun is a strange concept. Let's see. Okay, I got your book, A Beginner's Introduction to Meta Nature, off Amazon. I'm looking forward to digging in. All right. Yeah, Hotep, peace. I will probably butcher your name, so I'll say Brother Moore. All right. Sarah Jahudi, off subject. I'm currently reading Beginner's Introduction to Meta Nature, and I'm trying to find out how to transliterate the phrase "my pleasure." The phrase "my pleasure" is nehemi. And I would say that that's the closest that we would come to that English phrase, "my pleasure," would be nehemi. And let me spell it. I typed it in there. It's the scientific transliteration of how you would transliterate it. But a tentative pronunciation would be nehemi. And what that means is it's like saying "my pleasure," but in a sense of don't sweat it. Like, don't even, like, it's automatic. You know, like what I did, like, you know, like if you do something for somebody and somebody says thank you, then your response after somebody says thank you usually is, "Oh, my pleasure." Or we say "you're welcome." Most people say "you're welcome." Some people say "my pleasure." And so what that nehemi is saying, that, hey, Don't even mention it. Like you don't owe me a praise, because when you're thanking someone, you're actually praising them. It's a word for praising. And so Nehemi is like saying, I don't, you don't have to praise me. That was automatic. That's something that I just do. I that's in my character. I already do that. I don't need a praise. I don't need a pat on the back. Nehemi, my pleasure, my pleasure. So anyway, that's how you would say that. So you're saying that the Remich called them nature, but fundamentally, when we say God, they are the same thing. Okay, so that's second. No, I can't say that that's the same thing, because you have to I probably went over this already. I mean, I probably answered your question already, so I don't want to repeat myself. But just to say again, shorter, that when we say God, we you won't know if you're referring to the same mental construct that the Egyptians had until you unpack what you mean by God. Because like I said, when a Christian says God, or some Christians, when they say God, they're talking about Jesus Christ, their Lord and Savior. Now we know the Egyptians was not, when they say the word nature, they were not talking about Jesus Christ, a Messiah, or all that stuff. So we have to be very careful with that. So I hope that's understood. But when we use the word or the shape God, we are immediately taken back to Western world's definition and concepts of God. That's not true. We're not necessarily taken back. That's only what we allow. See, that's why we have to understand language. The concepts that we walk around, we walk around with a mental lexicon in our heads full of signs, and we can tweak what these shapes trigger, but we have to do that collectively. And so this is why the more people understand how language works, and then they actually take up the study, and not, we don't waste time just going back and forth, being scared to use words, and all the stuff I mentioned earlier about, people not just studying it. It's like, it's a adversarial environment. People just want to debate just for the sake of debating, and stuff like that. But if we really, really was serious about it, it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to happen. Like I don't have a problem using the word God. I could say Egyptian God. I could say the Egyptian God was Seer, or Osir, or Osiris, or whatever. I'm perfectly fine with that. The God Amen, the God whatever. And when I say that, I know some people, when I say it, some people will make a comment back at me and say, well, they're not gods. The Egyptians didn't use the word God. I'm like, man, I'm speaking English. The Egyptians didn't use like 99.9% of the words I'm using to talk to you. So why isolate that word and have a complaint about that word? You see what I'm saying? So that's what I meant by polarized. Certain words we're traumatized by certain words, and we don't have to be. We don't have to be, because actually the shape, the word God, there are African words with that same shape, Godu, which has a very close, similar, original meaning that the word God meant, which is to pour libation or to invoke. If you ever look at the etymology of the word God, most people will just stop at German. They'll say that's a German word, good, and it means good, or all this other kind of stuff. But when you go to its most furthest back, that they kind of speculate about, they're not quite sure. But if you just look at it, they will tell you that it goes back to a word that means to invoke or to pour out. And if that's not African, I don't know what is. Africans to this very day pour libation all the time. Africans to this very day invoke deities all the time. Talk to an Ifa practitioner, and I guarantee you they'll nod their head. Yes. Every time they get together, they're making performing sacrifices or pouring libation or invoking one of the Orisha and things like that. And that behavior matches the archaic meaning or the historical meaning of the word God. But I'm saying that to say that there are African words with that very similar shape. Gadu or Gudu, Godu, and some other words. I'm just going off the top of my head right now. So I'm just saying this to say we got to go beyond this surface stuff, this surface stuff. Like, I swear, I think that social media has made us very comfortable in just, being content with the entertainment. We got to go beyond it. It's good to be entertained. Like, I don't discourage people from watching YouTube, doing hangouts, the Facebook posts and all that stuff. That's fine. That's good. But we gotta come harder, bigger, better, and stronger if we ever going to make progress as a people in terms of knowledge and creating knowledge, building and expanding our knowledge base. But anyway, concepts of what? Oh yeah, I'm way back. Let me scroll all the way to the bottom. Did anybody want to come in here? Because we've been on an hour. I'm hogging the mic. So look, I'm gonna call people out. We got so y'all been hearing my voice, and everybody knows well, everybody should know who I am. But just in case you don't, let me switch my avatar. But anyway, so my name is Wujao, Rini Wujao. All right. For those who don't know, Rin, the word Rin in Rani Kemet or the Egyptian language is the word for name. And it don't just mean name, but that's like this one word swap translation. Rin means name. But it actually, we should start saying that it means identity, because identity in someone's identity encompasses not only what we call them, but also their behavior, their character, and stuff like that. So I think we should really start looking into that and switch up and say that the word Rin in Rani Kemet means identity. How something is identified, because you can identify something by the way it behaves or the attributes or properties that it has. Like, for example, the difference between plants and animals, the word plant, Plants, and animal, the difference between the two is so called because of the properties that they express. Animals are called animals because they're animated. They can move on their own. Plants cannot. Plants can't move on their own. So it just so happens that animals are objects that are animated. And humans, we move freely without, we move on our own volition or whatever the case is, we can move. So we're animals in that sense. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, but things are identified. Your ID, how you're identified, it goes a little bit beyond more than what you're called, because I can call you out your name, but that's not your ID. You see that? So there's a difference. So anyway, Rini Wujao, that's my identification, Wujao. But anyway, so I say that to say, who else we got on here? We got Sin. The word Sin is brother. Sin Sean. We have Sin June. We have Sin Antoine, and we have Sin Jehuti Ma'at. That's who's rolling with me tonight. So if anybody else want to come pop up in here before we leave, let me know. And don't be scared. Don't be scared. Nobody's going to put you on a spot or anything like that. But if you have something to say or want to participate in the conversation, by all means, Second Ra, if you want to come in here, just let me know. That way I don't have to scroll up and read a bunch of comments. Let's see where I leave off at. Some are just olders and not elders. What is a word for mucus in Medu Neture? That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I could find out for you. And that was from Jerron Towns. If I understand your question right, mucus, talking about mucus like snot, right? So we'll find that out for you. Wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I was looking for a link. Don't we have a video on how to look up words in the Vicus dictionary?
Yeah, we do.
I was on medunature.com site.
Yeah, metaneture.com, and also the Facebook, I mean the YouTube channel, Metaneture, which is from the class channel. That should be on there, but it's on the site. But the brother, what was his name? Jerron Towns. One of the words for mucus is BTK, BTK. That is the skeletal transliteration of that word, and it's mucus. All right, and that's what was used for, the bodily excretion.
Yeah, I got it pulled up.
Mucus, and I'll just put it inside of the chat real quick. BTK. Now, the way I'm pronouncing it and the way that everybody pronounces these words should not by any means be misconstrued as if we're saying that this is how the ancient Egyptians pronounced these words. What people have to understand at a very from the start is that the hieroglyphic writing system that we call Sesh Medu Neter, it has no documentation of vowels. All that it expresses are the consonantal skeletons of its words. So when people are pronouncing these words, you can't pronounce a word without vowels. So what happens is, based on consensus and to make something standard that we can all communicate and stuff, early Egyptologists decided to stick an E in between those consonants. So when we say the word for health, which has a consonantal structure of S, N as in Nancy, and B as in boy, we'll just say it as Seneb. And we don't quite know, or people don't even pay attention to where the stress is. We don't know if it's Seneb with the stress on the second syllable or Seneb with the stress on the first syllable. So all of these are conventions. So don't let anyone try to create a straw man argument as if we're saying that if I say Uncle Jasaneb, Reni Wujao Meneb Rimaat, all these different things that we pronounce these different words are saying that we're saying it just like the ancient Egyptians did. But also know, in addition to that, that has nothing whatsoever with us knowing what the words mean. I could say Hotep, Hetep, Hutep, Hatup, and all that stuff, and understand that that what I'm saying, it means offering, satisfaction, peace. You understand? So, I just hope that's understood. But anyway, I just want to say that. So when I say Betek or Betek, Betek, this is the way I'm pronouncing it, but transliterated, it would be BTK, and that means mucus. Yep. So hopefully that answered that. Let's see. Who else? What else? I guess okay, I can scroll through now. I talked to everybody to death. Okay, second Ra, Necher like epidemic, for instance. I'm sure the story I have seen about him being the guardian of the entire continent of Africa is false, but are there any other Necher that are left in obscurity? If I understand your question right, well, it depends on by who, because a lot of the Necher are misunderstood by a lot of people. I mean, especially if people think that the Neteru are real sentient human beings, then you have a problem. If you can, and that's what I've been posting on Facebook lately. If you can look at a ram-headed human being and think that that depiction is to be taken literally, oh, I guess we got an Amber Alert. Apologize for that. I had an Amber Alert on the phone. But yeah, if people can look at those depictions and take them as literal, I mean, children do that. Like, children don't know any better. So you would expect children to do that. Like they watch cartoons. We all watched cartoons before, and we can't discern that until we get of, a certain age, as we get older and we mature and stuff. But you don't expect adults to look at things like that and take those things literally. And so that's why I've been posting on Facebook that I understand if you first come into contact with this, that's a valid question. You may look at it and be like, wow, did the Egyptians really think that this ram-headed human was real? Now, that's a valid question. But, first time. But if I have to argue with you and to convince you that it's not, then we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. You know what I mean? So, so a lot of the nature are obscure because people can't see beyond the surface and dive into the figurative systems of these different cultures. They don't understand. Like, for example, a recent conversation about Osiris, the story of Osiris and Set. The famous story that most people know about, where Set kills Osiris, chops him up into 14 pieces, that particular story. And one of the things that was pointed out between the relationship between Osiris and Set is that Osiris represents agriculture and Set represents pastoralism. And so agriculture and pastoralism are modes of production and living. And those modes of production and living were in competition with one another for resources. Because if you're a pastoralist and you have animals and grazing and stuff like that, you're going to want to use the land for that purpose. But if you're a farmer, you're going to want to use the land to grow crops. And that's a conflict of interest there. So they fight. And so Osiris representing agriculture, Set representing pastoralism, those are characters in the narrative who fight. Or I guess it wasn't really a fight, but Satuk plotted and killed him. Now, if you are constantly under the impression that Osiris is a real human male and Satuk is a real human male, then you'll miss all these different things that are in the narrative. Same thing with Cain and Abel, and that was brought up in the conversation, but it's in reverse. Cain and Abel were brothers, but they were at odds with one another. And both of them represent modes of production. So Cain kills Abel. And then, he gets punished for it and so on and so forth. But that's how that happens. So I'm saying, so there'll always be an obscure to people who can't see beyond, this literalism, there's like a movement where people want to take things literally, even though the intended authors and the culture itself never said so and things. And so that's what we have to change. We got to encourage people to really pause and take time out and study, and also notice that there is a difference between real and literal. All the Neteru are real, but they're not literal. And that may sound a little funny, but just take in what I just said, that the Neteru are real, but they're not literal. And it simply means that they represent, like, for example, allegories. Allegories use real characters, real places, real events, real phenomena as a vehicle to convey something. But the allegory itself is not literal. So a symbol, if you want to use the word symbolic or symbol, a symbol is a stand-in for something. The symbol itself is not that something, but it represents that something. So that something is real, but the symbol is not. or it's not literal, I should say. Because I can use something else to represent something else, and both of those things can be real, but what I'm conveying as a vehicle is not to be taken literally. So the natural are real, but they're not literal. So I hope everybody understands that. So if I say Osiris represents resurrection, represents farming, represents agriculture, and all those other kinds of things, that's real. Those things are real. Farming is real. Agriculture is real. All those things are real. Rebirth, regeneration, those things are real. But if I represent those things in a figurative expression, label it Osiris, give it a character, give it, some other attributes of its character and stuff like that, and cause it to interact with another character that I did the same thing to and stuff, that is what you call figurative expressions. Love, the emotion of love is real, but you hear a lot of love songs where people will personify love as a person, call on love. They'll ask love to come to them and stuff. They'll talk to love and have love talk back and stuff like that. All in these love songs. I don't know about now, but anybody who's an old head who listen to real music will know all these different love songs out there. They personify love. Like a lot of you listen to love songs, they play around with that. So love is real, but how they play around with it is not to be taken literal. So things are real, but not literal. And there's a difference. But anyway, I don't want to talk. It's 2 hours long. Anybody else got anything? Anything going on? Anything to talk about? I see nobody wanted to come inside the chat. Yes, no, maybe so. Anybody? Oh, it's quiet. I can hear a pin drop.
I thought Mo was gonna come in. She got some event she doing tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I guess that's why not.
Yeah. All right. Well, I didn't want to keep going on. I'm not, trying to turn this into, like I said, it's open discussion and things like that. But I really just want people to just be encouraged and motivated to study, slow down and study. Just take your time and study. That's it. It's no rush to that. Like this microwave generation, we gotta remember that we're living in a microwave generation. Everybody wants things very fast, and we're being conditioned to be this way. You got email, electronic mail, you got text message. That means that we have access to each other in real time now, whereas 20 years ago it wasn't like that. You had pagers. We had to page somebody first, then they had to find a phone booth, call you back, or wait till they got home and called you back. You had to post mail things and stuff. You had dial up on the internet, so it wasn't like you can even check your email all fast like that. And even when the first cell phones came out or mobile phones, they weren't connected to your email or anything like that. So now we're highly sped up. We're in a microwave environment. We have fast food restaurants. You got people who are eating on the road, literally driving, can't wait to stop at a red light so they can take another bite out of a sandwich. You got some people who can't stand red lights. They're in a rush to get somewhere. Then you got other people who are hoping that the light turn red. They hungry. They got their McDonald's in the passenger seat. Just can't wait to take another bite out of that Big Mac, or whatever the case is. So fast food. We have the internet. We got, information's at our fingertips. We can look up things, open up a couple of windows and tabs in your browser. You can have access to an entire encyclopedia now called Wikipedia. Whatever, PDFs, find stuff real fast. Everything is just fast. And, there's pros and cons to that. One thing we just can't let it do is we can't let it short circuit or cause us to take shortcuts in our development of knowledge. And that's what we're doing. And so people have to slow down and really, really understand things. Because a lot of arguments, 90% of the arguments around the world is rooted in miscommunication. I say that loosely, 90%, because somebody's gonna be like, well, show me the research, show me the journal that says 90%. But a very, very high percentage of arguments around the world, arguments and conflict around the world, from political to the ordinary personal household arguments, are rooted in miscommunication. And so to prevent it, we got to learn how to communicate. So we got to slow down. We have to understand what people are saying and what they mean by what they say and everything. Look at the Tower of Babel story. Like, revisit the Tower of Babel story in the Bible. I think that's what, Genesis 10 or 11? One of them. I think Genesis 11. I don't know, 10 or 11. It's been a while. But revisit that story, all right, and read it with what I've been saying about communication. And the Tower of Babel story is when Nimrod, he's basically the head person over a large group of people. Everybody's unified. Why? Because they're all speaking the same language, which means, like I said earlier, you have a large group of people that are walking around with the same mental lexicon in their head, all the same signs. So if I say something, then you're going to understand me. And when you have a large group of people that communicate and speak the same language, then you're able to do almost anything within reason. Obviously, everything is possible. You're able to do it because you got at your disposal the ability to communicate to a large body of people. No misunderstandings and things like that. Everybody's able to communicate, speaking one language. So what do? They build a tower, right? They come together and build a tower. So they unify in a building project so that they won't disambiguate words and become dispersed. So they build this tower. The tower supposedly reaches heaven, wherever heaven is, but it reaches heaven. So now it's like knocking at the door of God's house, and God doesn't like it. God's like, wait a minute, what's going on, man? These people are building this thing. I don't like that. So God sends some people down to see what they're doing. Or he says, come, go, let us, I think. So God goes down there too. Goes down there and see that they're building a tower. And look what happens. What's the first thing? God doesn't like it, right? But what does God do? God disrupts the communication. Now, that's very, very, very typical military action. The first thing you do with an enemy in battle is to disrupt communication. And that's what God did. He disrupted the people's communication so they could no longer communicate with one another. And what happened? They started to separate and isolate themselves from each other and disperse. And they became different so-called nations and stuff. I think that's where you get the table of nations. And this group of people went that way. This group of people went that way and stuff like that. That's because of what God did. So read that story. So now the thing is that if we want to get that back or whatever the case is, we got to just do it in reverse. Everybody has to speak one language. So communication is the key. So once you start speaking different language, thoughts become misconstrued, things get lost in translation, then you can't be functional. You can't be effective and functional at the same time. So that's why the tower was destroyed and they weren't able to build anything like it again. You know what I'm saying? So just read that story again. But we got to just do better, and people have to learn to communicate. So I said, tell people to slow down and to learn we'll have less arguments and things like that, especially little petty, silly arguments that we see a lot, repetitive over and over and over again. But anyway, anybody have anything? I'm trying to keep up with the comments. Like everybody switch to health, conversation on health. Second rise, another one. Like the Pared Mheru, I would love to read that without it being connected to that pseudo-comedic yoga or meditation, chakras, and nonsense. I just want the facts of what the Remich said through the Medu Necher. Yeah, well, hey, you got to learn the language. You have to learn the language. And you have to learn the figurative system, though, because, like, matter of fact, let me just switch my screen real quick. We show this all the time. But if you notice, part of our curriculum is we have 3 levels to our curriculum, and we have a pyramidal. We call it a pyramidal curriculum because it's we shape it like a pyramid, obviously, and it's broken up into 3 different levels, and each level coincides figuratively with the 3 seasons that the ancient Remech, or the ancient Egyptians, had: the season of inundation, the season of emergence, and the season of harvest. They all follow one another in a nice order. First, you have to flood. You have to inundate the land to make it fertile. So you have to make the area fertile. So level 1 corresponds to the fertilization of our endeavor, our minds, etc., etc. So what we do, stage 1, we learn the foundation of Rani Kemet and Sesh Medu Neter, which is the spoken and written language of ancient Egypt. Stage 2, we get into the grammar and penmanship. People want to learn how to write it and draw the actual different styles of the Sesh Medu Neter, whether it's the formal hieroglyph, very distinct, or the more what they call cursive style, that's a little bit more simplified. We call it simplified Sesh Medu Neter. Either way, that's stage 2 of level 1. Stage 3 is a foundations laid in historical comparative linguistics, because you're going to have to know a little bit about that to know how language is analyzed diachronically, which means through different eras of time, as opposed to synchronically, which is stage 2, which is studying the grammar of a particular period of time. All right, so those are the differences between that's what's on level 1, stage 1, 2, and 3. That's making everything fertile. Fertile for what? So now we're going to plant and allow things to grow. That's level 2. Level 2 is the recovery of historical pronunciations. Remember earlier I said that the way we pronounce these different words today is just based on parroting the consensus, the early Egyptological consensus of putting an E in between each of the consonants. But now with some information under our belts and understanding different methods, now we can start to try to recover the true historical pronunciations of a lot of these different words. All right. Now, to that end, we don't know how much we could do, but at least we'll have the tools to go about making that happen, to do our best to try to make that happen. Anyway, that's stage 1. Stage 2 of level 2 is the development of speech communities. I hear a lot of people say, hey, don't learn ancient Egyptian. It's a dead language. It's not going to put money on your table and everything like that. Go learn Spanish. Go learn another African language, or learn Arabic, or learn French, or learn this and that. All those things are good. And what we have to understand is that we are a people that can walk and chew gum at the same time. We could learn another African language that's spoken today. Fine. Perfect. Learn Spanish. I took Spanish when I was in school. I lost my vocabulary, but I still have my tongue. I can, like, if I see a Spanish word, I can pretty much pronounce it correctly, even though I probably never seen it before, because I still have the sounds in my head and the tongue for it. But anyway, learning Spanish, learning French, all that stuff is good. That's encouraged, but that's walking. But we could chew gum at the same time. So at stage 2, development of speech communities is after you recover the historical pronunciation, we can therefore develop a speech community with this language. And there's nothing wrong or adverse in doing that, because we could walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have a language that we can actually use as a lingua franca, a classical African language that we can fall back on and bring to life. Anyway, stage 3, recovering the realities. And this is one I want to focus on, or I've been kind of speaking on tonight. Stage 3, recovering the realities behind figurative speech. That's very, very important. Now, notice where it is on this pyramidal scheme. It's at the last stage of level 2. So you have to have some prerequisite information under your belt first before you can even begin to understand the realities behind the figurative speech. You see, so, trying to make heads or tails out of certain things without going through those previous steps is really going to be, it's really going to handicap you. So anyway, that's where you recover the realities behind the figurative speech. That's when you find out about the realities behind the myth, the narratives that we call myths, and the allegorical nature of the deities and all these other things. And I can tell you this, that at stage 2 on the grammar, you're going to learn very convincingly that the ancient Egyptians were intentional and pros at using figurative speech. I can tell you this, what we call as relational adjectives in the Egyptian language is just full of different metaphors, allegory, plays on words, idioms, idiomatic phrases and things like that. It's just there. And we call those relational adjectives. All right. But you have to learn the grammar to understand that. But once you do, you'll say to yourself, wow, okay, it's embedded in the language for them to do this. So once you understand that it was embedded in their mode of communication, then when you start saying, seeing these different deities and stuff like that, you will understand that these are figurative expressions. They're not literal things that are you'll be able to understand what's going on and what's what. But anyway, and then level 3, which is the harvesting, which is you reap what you sow, is all things of application, utilization, execution. So anyway, so that's our curriculum. Every now and then we kind of go over that, but I just went over that just now to kind of show that this is what I encourage people to slow down and to walk systematically through a process. You can't learn this stuff on Facebook, a street corner, yelling at each other, battling each other and stuff like that. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, but I saw that people were talking about health and stuff like that. Health is very, very important because without your health, I don't care what like you could be a walking library. If your health fails you, then what? So health is something, any organization that is trying to be holistic in what it covers and what it does, they have to deal with health. I don't expect to go to auto mechanic school and learn about health. So I'm not talking about stuff like that, but any of the organizations that people join that want to be, well-rounded and holistic, they have to have a serious component that deals with health, because health is very, very important, and I don't just mean physical health, like, your health, but you have to focus on even health itself in a more holistic way, your mental health as well, or your psychological health, or as some people may say, your spiritual health. In ancient Egypt, your physical body was part of the spirit, so to speak. It was the most tangible outward expression of the spirit, called the kat, which is the body. Yeah, different components. Like they didn't see the spirit as this homogeneous entity, this one thing. The spirit was broken up into levels and layers and things like that. Even what I said earlier about Ren, when I say Reni Wujao, my name is Wujao, a person's name was part of their being, their spiritual makeup. your identity. And like I just said about what's called relational adjectives, you'll understand that when you're dealing with relational adjectives, you'll understand how the language works, where that part of your persona can own something. Like, you know how we say, this is my book? Like, this is my book, meaning that I possess this book. It's in my possession and I'm holding it. It's tangible. But, and because my physical body can hold it and possess it. Well, even in the language itself, once you learn the grammar, you'll understand that parts of your persona that's not physical can possess things. And we call these attributes and properties that can be possessed. So it was never a point where, the Egyptians saw the spirit as this one entity and then the body is something separate and stuff like that. These are all interconnected, interwoven to create, the anatomy of what they refer to as beingness. And, only way you know there's no language. But anyway, let me close out. But anybody else have anything?
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hotep a bet. Yeah, I think you went in tonight discussing how people like to microwave things, and some people really don't deserve to know certain things. Like just having information isn't enough. You have to respect the culture, and like you said, respect the. You have to learn the basics before you can move on to the more advanced learning of the culture. Like you have to respect the figurative language, like you brought up. So if you don't have the tools, if he's pointing you towards the right tools to get, and if you don't have enough respect as a student to take in the tools, so you can decipher the meanings of the underlying meanings of the culture, then why would somebody want to have a further discussion with you? So I think a lot of people are just disingenuous. And just want to act like they know more than what they really know instead of saying, I don't know. Or they might have already in a belief already that they're trying to push and they're trying to learn something that they can attack. So that's just my take on it. I think you went in good tonight.
Well, now that's true. I mean, that's kind of sums up my sentiments on that. And I say this too, like me, myself, I don't go around attacking the Bible. I grew up, under the influence of the Bible. I wasn't a go hard church goer and stuff like that. My parents never forced me, into church, Bible study and all that kind of stuff. But, we can't help but to be influenced by it because that's the prevailing system that we interact with, and so. But later on, I was dealing with the Bible. I dealt with the Bible. I used to know the stories in quotes by heart. I could probably whip out a few from memory even right now, depending on what, whatever the subject matter is and stuff. But I'm a person that I've read the Bible from cover to cover more than once. And, I've had to go to be tested to be a minister, prison minister, and things like that. So I've had to go through things dealing with the Bible, but I don't attack the Bible because I've gained an understanding of different figurative systems of different cultures. And so the attacks that I see some people make, I feel the same, as far as on the Bible and Abrahamic traditions or followers of Abrahamic traditions, how people attack them and their tradition. I feel the same way about people who do that as the opposite, people who do that about African traditions. I see it all as the same. And what it boils down to is just ignorance of the figurative systems. How to discern when something is to be taken in a figurative way and what is the reality behind that figurative way. Because if you don't know that, then you'll always be lost in the sauce. And that's just it. And so I see people will try to take a biblical quote or whatever and try to force it to be literal just to argue against it. You know, like Jonah, like, for example, snakes don't talk. The serpent in the garden, you know, some people may take that literally, but that's an immature stance to take. But nevertheless, it exists. Some people may think Jonah, a man named Jonah, actually did get swallowed by a big fish for 3 days and 3 nights, and it spat back out on the island of Joppa or whatever it was, or whatever it was. Some people may take that literally. Some people may actually think that a tower, that human beings built a tower that reached heaven, wherever, you know, wherever that is. Some people may think that a woman who was trying to run from a city looked back and turned into a pillar of salt, literally, or whatever the case is. Though, you know, all that's possible, and you got people out here that probably take that literally, but we just have to label it and understand that that's an immature stance to take. And so what we have to do, we have to set up where people are walked through some kind of institution to where they're trained, their minds are trained to properly understand what these things are and how these figurative systems work based on whatever tradition that they're dealing with. You know, we have to do that. And if we don't do that, we run the risk of what we're dealing with now. People walking around with different interpretations. People want to project their biasness on other things, you know, and things like that. They just don't understand. And that's fine, because we don't know everything. So if I come up to a culture or tradition that I'm not a part of and I'm not familiar with, by default, I'm going to have I can only look at it through my lens that I'm familiar with. So that's a given. So that's not a problem. But the problem comes is when you're not disciplined and mature enough and humble enough to realize that that's what you're doing. You know, because if I'm born and raised in America under a Christian household all my life, and then let's say I move over to India, and I'm among people who practice Buddhism, or, you know, whatever. I'm just using that as an example. My natural view of Buddhism can only be from a perspective of Christianity at first, because that's all I know. And that's fine. And see, so there should be some kind of mechanism in place for me to make the adjustment. But if I'm sitting in India and I don't realize that that's what I'm doing, and I fight and I argue with the people who practice Buddhism, and I try to force my Christian concepts on everything that they're doing, then that's a problem. That's where the problem comes in. And that's what people are doing to African traditions, especially with Kemet, because Kemet is deemed as dead. And a lot of dead people are disrespected. If you notice that when people are no longer in the picture, it's easy to pop off at the mouth and disrespect people, wherever the case is. But if they're front and center right in your face, people are hesitant to say what they say. So Kemet is not present right now. They consider it dead. So anybody says anything about Kemet. But and I say that because, like, for example, Yoruba, the Ifa practitioners of the Yoruba traditions and people of Nigeria and so on, they're not nearly as disrespected as ancient Egypt or the people who study Egypt are and do. Why? Because Yoruba is here right now, present. And you say the wrong thing to a person who practicing Ifa or whatever the case is, you really don't know what the consequences could be, you know, as far as how they feel about it, how they react to it, and whatever the case is, because it's real to them. It's like they're living it, you know, it's not dead. But Egypt is considered dead. Egypt is romanticized. Egypt is commercialized, and it's highly disrespected. You see, so that's what happens when it creates a problem, when people don't understand that that's what they're doing. They're projecting their biases onto a culture or tradition that they were not or are not a part of. And like I said, at first, that's understood. That's automatic. That's natural. That's the natural flow of things. You're going to do that. You know, like I grew up in America. If I go over to China right now China has different laws than American laws. So there has to be something in place to orientate me into the Chinese culture, so I can understand the do's and don'ts, what not to do, what to do. Can I eat with my fingers? Can I eat with my hands? Should I use chopsticks? Should I bow down? Should I whatever? Should I talk to somebody this way? Do they have certain words I should use? All of that, all those kinds of things. I have to learn that. But if I'm not even willing to learn that, and I'm not even realizing that, hey, I'm coming with my own American biases on things, and I'm just judging them, I'm like, why you do that? No, you shouldn't do that. And this, that, and the other. Like, who am I to say that? But that's what people do. People do that. You got Hebrew Israelites, you got people who are influenced by the Abrahamic traditions, try to step on over in the lane of ancient Egypt and try to dictate and regulate things. Like, miss me with that. Get out of here with that. It's not happening. But the thing is that it actually is happening because Kemet is quote unquote dead. But let people try to do that with Yoruba or the Akan of Ghana, or because the Akan traditions and Yoruba traditions are highly practiced by African Americans here in the United States. So let people do that with that, and they're gonna have a fight. They're gonna have a big pushback. But with Kemet, there's not much of a pushback because it's not actually a living tradition, so to speak, right now. You see? So all that stuff has to change. Even if it's not formed as a living tradition, people have to just get back to the respect of it and understand that. That's just fundamental. Very fundamental. So last thing, I'm just gonna check the chat one more time and see what's good. I see people talking about health at first. What do you know about the god nature Ma? Well, okay, understand this. That's from Jerron Towns. Understand this, that when you're talking about gods, the actual names of gods, most of them, the names are also regular words in the language. And remember, the Egyptians didn't walk around or didn't include a key or legend explicitly written inside all these different texts. In other words, they didn't have a glossary inside of text that had, told you the meaning of every single god or whatever the case is. Where you get the meanings from and stuff like that, or a better understanding of the gods, is to understand how they function in the myth itself, the narrative itself, and how it interacts with its relationship with other gods and other things. So by its function is how you understand it. But a lot of the different gods, their actual names are also regular words inside the language that carry the same meaning, or one of the principal meanings of what their name is. Like, for example, and I'm gonna get to Ma, but just a more famous example is the god Amen, or Amun, or Amun. That word itself is a word that means imperceivable. Some people translate it as hidden. I prefer to say imperceivable, because something that's covered is hidden, but this is something that's imperceivable, whether it's covered or not. So Amen represents, or they translate as hidden or imperceivable, and that's a word that's in the language, but it's also a label for a description for a class of different things that are all related under that concept of being imperceivable. So there's an imperceivable aspect of existence itself that's called Amen. Now, Ma means to be straight. It's something that's straight. It is something that is a guide, a rule, because we call something that's straight that we use all the time, we call it a ruler. A rule and a guide, something that's straight. And we also say that this is the word for truth, or true, something that's true. When we say something is true, we'll say it's true, meaning that it's straight. Something that is I mean, I'm just keep repeating myself. So something that's straight or true. So the word ma'a means true. Like I say ma'acheru or ma'cheru, it means true of voice. Means that what you say is real. What you say is what you do is what you say. What you say is what you do. Do what you say, mean what you say what you mean, as people will say. But in terms of a god or a deity, ma'a, about the feminine ma'at, and ma'a is a masculine noun, and ma'at will be the feminine. So I hope that's clear. Now, if you're asking me, what do I know about the god Ma'a? There's nothing prolific about the god Ma'a. Now, I'm not saying Ma'at, but Ma'a. Ma'at, you hear and see and read about Ma'at, the feminine, right, more in abundance all across Egypt or Kemet. Ma'a as a actual distinct nature or divine divinity and stuff like that, you don't find that like that as Ma'at. So if you're asking me about that, then that's what I'm my response to you about that. All right. And you have to understand that nature and things, the symbol and sign for nature is a standard. And these are things that are held up high. And it has within its connotation of something that's important. So things that were very important to the people and to the culture were also deemed as nature or various different nature. These are principles, important principles. When I say principles, I don't mean, just forces of nature or principles and how other people will try to make it out to be. But what I mean by principles is that, like, for example, if let's see what's good. Okay, if you live in a community where a lot of children are losing their teeth to eating candy and whatever else the case is, like, we just finding out a lot of children are just losing teeth, their baby teeth and their adult teeth, both, they're losing it. So what we will do in that situation is that we will emphasize and place a higher value and higher importance on properly brushing your teeth. And so we'll have toothpaste, methods of brushing teeth. We'll try to perfect them and improve upon them and stuff like that, to the point where, in order to make a communal change, a change within a community to make a difference, we will deify brushing teeth, which means that it now becomes important to the community to make a change, and we would deify that. However we do it will be, it'll be up to the people and stuff like that, and we'll use whatever figurative mechanism within our understanding to do it. But the fact is that we will do something like that. It will become highly important, and we do it all the time on a very, very small scale, especially individually. Like, for example, if a lot of things we don't pay attention to because it doesn't hit us at home. Like, when something comes close to home for us or to us, then we pay attention to it and it'll become important to us in our lives. Like if anybody listening has children, and let's say your children are real young, like 3, 4, and 5 years old, or whatever the case is, then at that moment, you're not thinking about teenage pregnancy. You're not thinking about, boyfriends, girlfriends, none of that stuff, right? At that moment. But other people are, like, other people got to deal with their teenage children, doing those kinds of things and falling victim of teenage pregnancy or whatever the case is. But it doesn't affect you because it's not in your immediate circle. So it's not important to you. Even though it exists, it's not important to you. But the moment your children become teenagers and then something should happen to your children like that, all of a sudden the world just stops. You pump the brakes, and now that is the most important thing to you. But that's on a personal level. Now, what I'm saying is that communities did that as a whole. And whenever communities did that as a whole, or societies did that as a whole, usually those things that became that important to the people collectively became what we call gods or deities, or they were deified. Now, whether they were personified or anthropomorphized is a different story, because that speaks to the method that they use. But my point is that whatever becomes very important to the larger collective, that's usually what we call a process of deification. You're raising the level of importance among the entire community, and those become your gods. When agriculture and farming became important for the mode of production of the people, then they personified and deified agriculture and linked it together with some other types of things that are related, not the exact same, but related. And they put it all under one umbrella and called it Osiris or Wasir or Osir or Osar, however you want to pronounce it. So I hope y'all understand. You see how this works? Collectively, they put together related important things and put it into one big box and label the box. And that label becomes the name of the deity. Like, for example, I'm going to give you another example, and this is going to be the last thing. The idea of management, the idea of circumspection, the idea of administrating, the idea of what do you call it? Coordinating, being a coordinator, all of those kinds of things. All of these principles that became very, very important to a dispersed group of people. In order for them to come together, those ideas became highly, highly, highly important. And so those ideas were deified and tucked into a box and called Heru. So Heru becomes the name and label for the office of kingship, because a king has to be a manager, it has to be a coordinator, it has to be able to circumspect a multitude of things, to be able to coordinate these different components into a larger whole. They have to be able to administrate things and control and regulate things. And so those principles and ideas became thrown in the box, and on the top of the box, they put a label called Heru. And Heru means, Heru as a word itself was actually a regular word in the language, but it became, to be high, lofty, that which is high, the face of, the sky, and so on and so forth. And that ties into other different epithets that Heru would have and gain later on to kind of solidify these principles that I'm speaking about. So the king became the incarnation of Heru. Not that Heru was a real person or anything like that. These principles became so important in the culture once, especially when there was a unification process going on. Because when you got separate little little communities, small communities and stuff like that, while you're separate and you're just doing your thing, those principles are not very important. But when you're trying to build a federation and try to unify and stay unified and stuff like that, those principles become like top of the list. So you deify it. Matter of fact, the original glyph, one of the original glyphs for the word Netcher, is a standard with the falcon on it. So the idea and principles of kingship itself, the office of kingship itself, became very, very, very important. So it became divine. So the kings themselves were said to be gods on earth, the sons of Ra who ruled the sky, where you get Sa-Ra from. You know what I'm saying? So it's a whole bunch of different it's a whole bunch of principles that are only unpacked if you understand the figurative system and the cultural codes to be able to do so, to discern these kinds of things. So I just want everybody to understand that, and that's, I'm just giving a couple of examples. The same thing with Ma'at, because you asked me about Ma'at and Ma'at, and these are principles of of regulation, regulatory things, straightness, truthfulness, and what is straight puts things in order. Like when you, like at school, when you go to the cafeteria or you whatever, the teacher's always telling little kids, little children to line up, get in a straight line, get in a straight line. What does that produce? It produces order. When you line up straight and nice and neat, it produces order. So this idea of straightness, this idea of guide, regulation, law, regulatory, order, all those kinds of things is what's under the umbrella of what we call the feminine deity Ma'at, and you got the masculine of that Ma'a. It's a word for true. All right. And a lot of times in the language, which if you learn the language and you understand the grammar, you understand that what they're calling the feminine T, that feminine ending, that marker, is also used to speak about what's called the abstract it or the generic it, which is an abstraction. So it takes something and if you want to express the abstract aspect of it, you put the feminine T on it. So Ma'at is not a real female human being or something like that. This is the feminine aspect of the idea and concept of truth and stuff, or to straighten. And so when you take something that is a verb to straighten or whatever, and you make it into an abstract thing, you feminize it. And thus we have the word Ma'at. It's not that there was a female walking around with a feather in her head that lived, 276 trillion years ago and lived that long, and all of a sudden flew up in a spaceship and left somewhere, whatever the case is. It's not about that at all. That's not happening.
Yeah, I think a couple of those words that you gave for the meaning are even cognate, like regulate, or was it? Yeah, regulate.
The word correct. Yeah, you're right. The word correct, the word regulate, those are actual, cognates. Osar Motep did some work on that. They're actual cognates, and we don't even realize that. Yeah, that's true. Yep. So,
yeah, so it's a lot to it. We talked about a lot, but yeah, it's a lot to it. I just hope people, hear what you're saying and interested in learning more, because there's a lot of things that will help you, like I remember a story where someone said they were talking to an African, someone who spoke African languages, and he thought it was funny that we didn't know all the words in our vocabulary. Like, we don't use a lot or even know a lot of the words in our own dictionary, but them being the oral more oral language, they didn't use dictionaries and basically encoded a lot of the stuff in the language. So when you get to learn even more about stuff like that, it makes a lot of stuff easier to understand.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's a very good point. And I tried to mention that earlier, where back in the further back in time you go, there was no writing systems. So the question is, how did people pass down knowledge from generation to generation? Not only new knowledge, but just the act of communication, period. How was that done? And so they had to create or devise a way to do it. And so what we call in figurative speech was actually a necessity and a play. And that's why I went over, a little bit of what I posted on Facebook about what a word actually is and how language works, where a word, like how we walk around with signs and what a sign is. A sign is like a two-sided coin type of thing. You have the concept, and then you have you got form and meaning. The meaning would be a conceptualization of the concept, and the form would be whether it's spoken or written, whatever it is. And both of those together and the link of those two things is what's called a sign. And we walk around with these different signs in our head, but we have to be able to keep up with them. If we don't have a writing system yet, we had to keep up with these signs. And so in order to do that, there were very, very genius ways of doing that. And so there was a manipulation of that done by ancient Africans. And it's just that today we call it figurative language or figurative expressions and stuff. And that's what it is. I mean, we still do it today, but it's not at the very, very forefront of being purposely done on a wide scale, because we have writing, we have dictionaries. You know, we grow up in a culture that has writing. You know, writing was here before I was born. You know, and all that stuff. We were born and raised in a literate world. You know, so it changed. You know what I'm saying? So it changed. And if you go back far enough, a precursor to all that stuff is where you had elders of a community would store knowledge inside of ropes, but they would tie them in knots, and they were called, the knotty ropes, where depending on how the knot was tied, it would be a coding, an encoding of information, and you had to know how to untie it, or the act of untying it was synonymous with the act of decoding the knowledge that was stored in the knot itself. So some cultures prior to writing, developed that system of storing information. They use ropes to tie knots and to store information and to pass them on. So ropes became dictionaries. Now, if I just say that out the blue and say, hey, ropes are dictionaries, people think I'm crazy. What you mean ropes are dictionaries? What you mean ropes are dictionaries? And then, but you got to explain it. So everything, takes explaining, and if you're in a hostile environment where everybody's trying to debate and outperform each other and everybody's adversarial and stuff like that, you can never get to the point of just really having a good, productive conversation. I wouldn't be able to get to a point of explaining that, hey, ancient Africans used to take ropes, and depending on the style of knots and stuff like that, the elders devised a system of storing information, and it was taught to different people. So as elders passed on and they died, and made transitions, the next generation would understand or be trained, or somebody among them would be trained to be able to decode their things and pass it on, and so on and so forth. And in fact, even the word, one of the glyphs for the word wisdom and things like that in ancient Egypt is a tied knot itself, which shows and demonstrates or confirms a remnant of this idea that I'm talking about right now, the tying of ropes. Are you familiar with that? What glyph I'm talking about?
I think we might have seen it before.
Well, it's if anybody, just for anybody listening, it's the Gardner code is S24, and it's called the knot, or the girdle knot, and it stands for the full word, a logograph, which is chess or chesed, which itself means knot. But it's used as a classifier or determinative in words that have to do with knowledge and wisdom and stuff like that. So I'm just saying that to say that there are remnants of what I'm speaking about when a writing system was developed, where you see knots are associated with wisdom and information.
Yeah, how about the shinu? I think that's like a big old rope.
Yeah, that's a rope. Also, yep. Even the ankh. The ankh, you'll see the ankh is a rope. The ankh itself. You'll see depictions of that being a rope. You'll see the shinu, what they call the cartouche, being a rope, an elongated rope. The shin being a more circular form, not the elongated kind. But anyway, so I know it's 1 o'clock, 1 in the morning. We've been on here a lot longer. I said we're gonna be in here real short. But hey, get to start talking and stuff like that. So if there's nothing else, anybody in the chat, you got anything to say? I do want to say, please subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed our conversation, we can continue the conversation. Join our Facebook group, and reference the video if you got a question about or something that I said that you want to expound on or speak on or question me about, or whatever the case is, or anybody on the panel. Join the Facebook group. Our Facebook group is the same name as our channel, Seshu Maani Metal Nature on Facebook. So definitely subscribe to the channel. And yeah, and if you enjoy the conversation, like, I see it, we got 18, we got likes, we got 2 unlikes. It says I dislike this. We got 2 of those. Now I don't know why people would dislike it. If you don't like it, leave a comment. Tell us why you don't like it. If it's something that you would like to see us improve on, or whatever the case is, don't just be call them, it's those little silent haters. People just come, dislike it, and then roll out. They probably don't even watch the whole show or the hangout. And that's a shame. But hey, YouTube.
Yeah, that's strange. We rarely get the thumbs down.
Yeah, you can look at our videos and we don't make it a habit of getting thumbs down. I mean, but for real, that to do thumbs down and then don't leave a comment or have any productive thing to say, it has no meaning. So I like stuff like that. It's like it goes, means nothing. So
every time I put a video up, I get at least 2 thumbs down.
Yeah. I mean,
I go live and I get 2 thumbs down, and they never see nothing in the chat. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've seen channels. I've seen, how before you go live, there's a waiting period. Like you can go to the channel and it says going live in a few minutes or whatever. I've seen people who haven't even started their hangout and they got like 2 or 3 thumbs down, 5 thumbs down. Now, if that's not immature, I don't know what is. Like, that's just hater or immaturity or whatever. Like the hangout didn't even start and people are already clicking thumbs down or whatever on some of these shows I've seen. So it just comes. I mean, we are in an environment where we got multiple elephants in the room that people ignore. We're in an environment where people are always at odds at each other, fighting and battling each other. And this is not a conducive environment for learning, and I'm not that old. I'm not that old school to be all talking like, well, back in the day, so. No, man, this never gets old. Maturity and good character never goes out of style. It never goes out of style. But what's happening is people are enablers now. They're actually encouraging the childish behavior. They're encouraging the arguments. They're encouraging the beefs. Now I'm not talking about physical beefs where people are fighting, fist fighting and stuff like that. But whether they're academic beefs or not, that's very unproductive. There's a right way to debate. When you debate something, the whole idea behind debating is to beat down on something, to pull it apart, to see its inner workings and its components so that you can reconstruct something more and improve upon it. That's the idea of debate. I was on a debating team. And that's something that we fundamentally understood about debating, period. The principle of debating. And the principle of debating, there are correct ways to debate. There are arguments. Like the normal idea of an argument, we think of as negative. Like, why you arguing? We look at the word argument as negative. But no, argument simply mean it doesn't have a negative meaning to it unless we put one on there. Same thing with debating. So arguments and debates, if done properly, are very, very good things. They actually are fuel for the creation of knowledge. That's what it's doing. That's why you have academic debates and arguments and so on and so forth, because they actually use as tools to advance knowledge and to expand knowledge, create knowledge, and so on, and to get to the heart of any controversy, you know. So those are good, but man, that's not what we're using it for. It's, you know, all this stuff has to change. It has to change. So that's the environment we in, though. Now, me personally, if I have time, like I said, most of the time when I'm on Facebook, I'm multitasking. So sometimes something will catch my eye across my timeline or my news feed, and I'll address it. Even if I see patterns that are just plain as day, because a lot of times I'll respond to things or chime in on things for other readers and not necessarily the person that I'm directly having a conversation with. And that's how debates are as well. Because when you debate, one of the fundamental things that you learn if you ever do any amateur debating, serious debating, even on an amateur level, is that you rarely walk into a debate trying to convert your opponent. And a real life application of this is in the courtrooms. Like, you got a defense attorney and a prosecuting attorney. They're not trying to convince each other of anything. Like, they're not trying to convert one another of anything. Their focus is on convincing the jury, because the impoundment of 12 to 16 jurors with some standbys and 12 jurors, they're the ones who have to make the decision. They're the judges of whatever it is you present. So you're trying to convince them. You're not trying to convince the prosecutor. You're trying to convince these 12 people. You're not even trying to convince the people who are in the bleachers, in the gallery of a courtroom. You're not trying to convince them at all. You're trying to convince those 12 people. And so that's how debates are when they're properly set up as well, you know, because debates usually are either have a panel of judges. It depends on who's judging. Whoever is the deciding factors of controversy, that's who you are appealing to, not your opponent. You know, so, and that's something that's just fundamental to debating. So, like, a lot of times when I'm engaging in a back and forth thing, I'm not trying to convert somebody. I'm trying to just appeal to other readers so they can learn. Offer them information, point to different things, different books they could read or check out, whatever the case is, you know. And people have to realize that you can't teach. Facebook is not a learning environment. It wasn't built for that. It wasn't built for that. It just wasn't. YouTube is a video platform. You can put up tutorials and stuff like that, but on complex subject matter, it's best to use a well-structured classroom environment. And that classroom environment can be online. So it's not necessarily you have to be in person, face-to-face with a teacher or anything like that. But as long as it's well-structured and it's procedural, you have some curriculum going on, you have a step-by-step process. Somebody actually took time to put together and understand pedagogy, you know. That's what we need. So anyway, but you know, look at that. I'm still talking and whatnot. I don't know. I'll talk to everybody. Everybody done got 3 people left. But anyway, I want to say this, that I'm gonna continue offering classes for anyone to learn a beginner's level of session matter nature. It's an introductory level class that I give, 12 weeks long. There's 12 sessions, 1 session per week, and it's 12 weeks. All right. I start new class groups all the time. So if you're interested, go to the website. All the links are inside of the description of our video. You can go to the website. What you see on the screen on the right-hand side is a book that I use as a textbook for the class. We actually walk through the book interactively, and I answer questions, go over things, discuss everything chapter by chapter, section by section, so that I make sure that everything is understood as we travel the journey. The book on the left-hand side is a book that we did as a group, the Seshu Mani Meta Nature, and we addressed the Professor Walter Williams and his claim that the Egyptian hieroglyphic writing system has never been deciphered. So we asked the question, has it been deciphered? And then we rebuttal, and we wrote a rebuttal to Professor Walter Williams, something that he put inside of his book as in the appendix. So we're not trying to rebuttal his book, but we're rebutting one of the claims in the book about the language. So that's what's on the left-hand side. And both books, I would encourage people to get both books. One I use as a textbook for the class. Get it. Even if you take the class or not, it's written in a way where, you know, you can study on your own and follow along. As a matter of fact, I have it where on the website, you don't have to register for the interactive part. You can get the book, study on your own, and register for the self-study course so that you can become certified. So this study course is a certification course, and not too many people have the certificates. I am very, very, very stingy with these certificates because this stuff I take serious, and you have to earn the certificate. So people pass the course and they show proficiency, they get certified. It's just, you know, that simple. And I make sure of it. If you take the course and you are there for every session, stuff like that, I guarantee that you'll be able to transliterate and translate simple inscriptions or more of the basic inscriptions. I guarantee that because I make sure of that. But the book on the left, the rebuttal book, also it's written in two parts. Part one is actually going over the writing system, how it works, so people can understand some very prerequisite and fundamental information about the writing system, so that you'll even know that we're actually rebuttaling Professor Walter Williams in part two. So part two of that book is the actual rebuttal, step-by-step, point-for-point rebuttal of Professor Williams. But part one, the first section in the book, is very, very instructive. It's very, very informative about the writing system and how it works. And the decipherment itself. What is decipherment? What does decipherment actually mean? What is a writing system itself? What else? What are some of the things we answer in there? What is the process of decipherment? What is translation? What is a translation? What is transliteration? And does pronunciation have any play in this at all? And stuff. So those are the questions that we cover and answer in part one. Part two is, like I said, point for point rebuttal of that. So if you ever hear anybody say that the hieroglyphic writing system has not been and never will be deciphered, get that book, read it enough to where you can chime in on the conversation and show them that they have no idea what they're talking about. All right, get the book. And like I said, if you're interested in the class, in the class, contact me. Go to the website. You can register. Contact me if you got any questions before registering. Register. Contact me. Whatever the case is, it's always open. I'm always forming new class groups. I'm about to start one. Actually, I think the beginning of September is Friday, September 1st. No, this Friday coming. Well, anyway, you know, the first week of September, I delayed a new class group starting in August. The month that we're leaving out of, for the sake of trying to get, you know, waiting on more people who were, you know, kind of, you know, in and out, wanted to take it, but didn't have the time for it, but making a schedule for it. And that's one of my biggest challenges, is trying to set a schedule for the different class groups. All right. So, and the cost is $100 for the interactive course. So 12 weeks just for $100. $100, 12 weeks. And that's for the interactive. So that's with me, and interactively walking you through the book, answering questions, going over, making sure that you understand everything section by section. All right. Oh, if you want the link, I'll drop it in the chat. It's in the description. So let me see. I don't know if it will allow me to copy and paste it from here. Okay, I just now put the link for the beginners book and then the other book. Let me grab that link. All right, and that's the link for the rebuttal book. All right, so that's both. And yeah, so get it, study it. Got any questions? Like I said, join our Facebook group, because if you have any questions about either book or whatever, if it's on the beginner's book, I encourage you to sign up for the class, because like I said, I go through the book thoroughly, answer all questions about whatever the case is. I've been teaching for quite a while. I've been teaching online for 2 years and maybe some change, 2 and some change. But I've been teaching all together for a lot longer than that, and my formal teacher years ago is Dr. Riketti Amin. So if anyone ever wants to know who was I formerly taught by, I let people know it's Dr. Riketti Amin. All right. So, but I've actually been studying the language longer than even I was actually studying the language before I actually even took her class years ago. And so in taking her class, I actually was able to, because a lot of people are autodidacts, and they learn on their own and things like that, and they can learn on their own very well. But I'm telling you, to be in a classroom environment among other people that are learning what you're learning, and to have access to some kind of feedback and instructor and stuff like that, you can't beat that experience. So no matter how good you think you are learning on your own, picking up a lot of books and stuff like that, that's fine. That's good. People can do that. But it's just different when you're in a learning environment among other people, especially when you have access to an author of a book that you're reading. So anything that I do from what I've done so far and in the future, I'm going to always make myself available, because I understand the value of that, no matter what book. Right now, I'm working on a grammar book, and I will be teaching the grammar course. And so when I publish that, I'm going to be teaching that and make myself available. So. And see, to a person like me, like a person who deals with the grammar and all of that good stuff, when people say the language hasn't been deciphered, it really, really becomes like just laughable. Like, you almost don't even want to dignify such a claim, because here I am. I'm actually going through the grammar forwards and backwards. I can describe the grammar to you. You know what I'm saying? And for somebody to say what hasn't even been deciphered, when I can successfully describe grammatical elements and all these different things, syntax, morphology, how, all the internal structures of words, the external economy of words that we call syntax, and how these different words group together and why they group together the way they group together and stuff like that. For somebody to step way backwards and say, hey, the language hasn't even been deciphered, it's real silly. But hey, that's what we gotta do. We gotta love our people. Yeah, and I appreciate that. Anybody who ordering the books and stuff like that, appreciate it. If you order on Amazon, yeah, you're gonna get it in 2 days. You're gonna get it real fast. Or you can order from the website. You'll get it just as fast. Either way, Amazon directly or from the website. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, then by all means take advantage of that. And but you'll get the book very quick either way. And again, read through it, ask questions, pick it apart, pull it apart. All right. So I know we keep going on. Anybody else? Well, it's only June and Jehudi. Y'all got anything? Anything I missed?
No, I think you covered it all. Thank you.
All right.
I'd like
Because
to
I,
thank the chat for staying with us, for hanging with us the whole night, though.
yeah. Because, you know, like we're always accused. Oh, this is another thing. You know, last weekend, myself and the brother Uncle Keck, we, we went to South Carolina and to this Marcus Garvey celebration, Marcus Garvey weekend celebration out there, and we had an opportunity to kind of, you know, say some words to the group of people that were there and everything. And so um the brother Unk, he gave a very good speech, I should say, you know, a very good speech, relevant speech to the here and now, you know, economics and things like that, and supporting one another and stuff. Um, and so what I wanted to impress upon the people that were there is something that I kind of touched on today, which is walking and chewing gum at the same time. You know, and I bring this up is because a lot of stuff that we talk about, when I say we, among us, among the session, and what we talk about on our hangouts and stuff like that, or me personally, you know, I focus on the under the hood stuff. And one of the things I did last weekend at that gathering is that I defined what the Amun Ra squad is and represents, like the name and the whole thing. And I don't think people heard that before. Well, the people there did definitely didn't hear it, and they appreciated me giving that and stuff like that. But in the gist of it, uh, it represents some of the things that I was talking about today, walking and chewing gum at the same time. So we have what I refer to as things on the surface. You know, almost look at it like an ocean. You know, for those who deal with Kemet, look at it as Nun. All right, the ocean, the abyss, the watery abyss of Nun. So you have things that come on the surface or come out of the ocean and come up on the surface, things that you can readily see and that's right in front of you here and now. Okay. But then there are things that are under the surface of the water, that are beneath the surface of the water that you cannot see, but it exists though, but you can't see it. And so what happens is we tend to live our lives neglecting that which we can't see because of the fact that we can't see it, even if we know it exists. But because it's out of sight, we call it out of sight, out of mind. And so I personally like to deal with all those things that are under the hood or under the surface or, you know, deep within the waters. And because people, it's those things that are out of sight, out of mind. Those things are called boring. They're not exciting. They're not upfront. They're not stimulating. They're not appealing to the you know, the thirst and the hunger of and the crave for stimulation and stuff like that which is on the surface. So, you know, what I explained is that in the name Amun Ra Squad, or the squad part, everybody understands what a squad is. A squad is a small group of people, and it's a smaller form of a squadron. A squadron is a large group of people, and it's usually used in a military sense of a squadron of planes, aircrafts, or whatever the case is. But everybody kind of understands what a squad is. So when I was explaining Amun and Ra, or Amun Ra together, and how we use it as the name of the group, I was explaining that represents walking and chewing gum at the same time. So we have Ra on the side of Ra, we have Ra being associated with the sun and everything that's dealing with heat, fire, light, and things that we can readily see. Daytime, the whole nine. The word for day is determined with the sun disk glyph and the whole thing. I went into that to show that Ra represents all the things we can see, all the things on the surface, the here and now, right now, you know, food, clothing, shelter, how to make money, putting food on my table, money in my pocket, everything that is readily seen right now, surface, surface, surface. And then Amun means hidden, or they say it means hidden, or imperceivable things, things that are beneath, mysterious, you know, whatever, obscure, all those kinds of attributes that they give to this term, Amun, and everything. So the squad, you know, I said there's a group of people that represent both walking and chewing gum at the same time. We can deal with the here and now, with the band-aids and all those temporary things, But we also deal with the under the hood stuff, dealing with the building of good character, the psychology of our people, all these kinds of things that are under the hood, out of sight and out of mind, and things like that. But those things tend to get neglected because they're boring. They don't stimulate, the thirst and all that kind of things that people want and everything like that. And it's a lot slower because you got to take your time when you deal with stuff like that, So that's how I broke it down. And I'm mentioning that now because this is something that we have to understand. And I say us as a Seshu, we represent that under the hood or beneath the surface type of stuff. So people have to really slow down to really kind of chime in and get with us and endure what we have to say and stuff like that. So that's a long way of me saying that anybody who's watching us and stuff like that, and I'm kind of picking up with what you said, Jehudi, that you appreciate people in the chat kicking it with us, staying with us, and listening even right now, whatever the case is. So I just want to show my appreciation because I understand that a lot of things we talk about on our channel and even in our group are not those things that are very, very exciting to a lot of people, but it's exciting to people who, have this as a focus. But it's the things that we take serious. Oh, you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing, right? I was saying that.
Yeah, these are things that I personally take very serious, and I like to deal with other people who take this just as serious. Egyptology, as I always say, is a scientific endeavor, and to study a culture is something that you really, really have to dive into and treat it like one of those complex subject matters like astrophysics, chemistry, biology, all those things. It's just as serious and just as intense and just as complex. And I don't mean complex as in hard. I mean complex meaning that it has a lot of pieces to it that you have to understand and see how it works. So complex don't always mean hard. It just means that it's a lot to deal with, and Egypt is it's very, very complex. It is. For a lot of different reasons. It's complex because it's old. It's quote unquote, air quote, dead. And that's another thing. People say that the Egyptian language is dead, but they have to understand linguistically, dead doesn't mean the same thing people think it means. Linguists use dead and extinct to make a distinction between language. Like the lay person, when we say something's dead, like a dead language, we are thinking extinct. But there's two layers to it. A language can be extinct, and then a language can be dead. And in that sense, dead just means that it's not a primary language of a speech community. But the ancient Egyptian language is not extinct, although it is dead, meaning that it's not a primary language of a speech community, but it's still spoken, and it's spoken as what people call today Coptic. Coptic is still spoken today. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that it's dead, meaning extinct, but then turn around and say it's still spoken as Coptic, whether it's liturgical or not. You can YouTube Coptic lessons right now and see people teach it and watch videos learning it and people speaking it fluently. You know what I'm saying? So I just hope everybody understands that difference. But the culture, likewise, it's not extinct. It's dead, but it's not extinct. And it survives in its offsprings and branches where you can see elements dispersed throughout Africa. All right, so we have to understand that. All right, so I hope everybody understands that. So if there's not anything else, I'll see the chats. What is the dark star? Saturn was also known as a star or fallen sun, dark sun. It used to be worshipped. Some speculate that it's still widely worshipped till this day, secretly. Yeah. That's another word that's polarized. Worship. What does worship mean? You know what I mean? So worship means different things to different people. In a predominant African sense, worship would convey the thought of cultivating, not worship in the sense of you groveling on your hands and knees and pouring out your essence to something, an inanimate object or whatever the case is. Worship in a African sense would carry the meaning of cultivating something, you know. And if you actually look up what worship originally meant, look at the historical, you know, changes that the word took. It's not far from what it historically meant. Worship was basically something that was worshipful, something that was worthy or worth, that had worth, importance, you know? So if you make something important, and this is the connection between worship and gods, because remember, deities are, like I said earlier, deities are a collective container of multiple related things, you know, whether they're principles, phenomenon, or whatever the case is, that becomes so important to a community of people that they place a very high value on it and deem it importance. Thus, you have the word worth. It becomes high in worth, worth, worth. And something that is high in worth becomes worshipful. And there you, hence worshipped. It becomes worshipped. And so these deities become worshipped because they have worth and they're important, but not in the sense of groveling and asking this deity for this, that, and the third, thinking that you're going to talk to an inanimate object and it's going to talk back to you. And, you know, you're going to have a whole conversation with something and whatnot and all this other kind of stuff. So again, like I said, people really have to get up under the hood and study these things to really have a full comprehension about all of this stuff. But anyway, so I'm done for the night. All right, so I just want to again say dua or dua'u, many thanks for those who tuned in. And I don't see you know, offer to allow, you know, somebody to come on in and chime in, you know, hang out with us inside the actual hangout. But we'll do this again and everything. But I'll see you all on Facebook here and there. Keep the comments coming. Remember to subscribe. If you know anybody else who's interested in the different topics that we talk about, you know, we focus on language, but we broaden it to the whole culture, the Egyptian culture and things like that, you know. And just remember, culture can't be taught on the street corner. Culture can't be taught in a rap battle style debates. Culture is not going to be taught on YouTube either. So people that's claiming that they, you know, that they can do that, teach you a culture in this way. No, you know, there's a saying that in order to know truth, one must live it. You know, live it, engage it, dance with it. You know, that's what you have to do. And always remember, I have this on the back of the book. I say this all the time. It's actually an introduction to the beginner's book and in the introduction to the rebuttal book. And I always say this: language is the oldest living witness to history, and language is the DNA of culture. Period. So if you're trying to study a culture and you want to ignore and neglect to learn its language, then you are shooting yourself in the foot. You are what we call daggering yourself. That's what the Dagger Squad would say. You're daggering yourself, or in put plainly, you are handicapping yourself if you are trying to study a culture, but you ignore the fact that you should learn its language. Then you are handicapping yourself, because culture is transmitted through its language. That's the medium for it. Just like sound permeates through air, the medium of air, or it could permeate through water, whatever the case is, it has to have a medium or whatever that it perpetuates itself through. Culture perpetuates itself through language. Language is therefore the DNA of culture. If you don't learn the language of a culture that you're studying or examining, you will always be handicapped. It's just that simple. So I always start people off. When you talk to me about Egypt, I start them off with the language. Learn the language first. Don't come to me and say that you are a Kemetic priest, priestesses, priest this, priest that, or whatever the case is, and you don't know anything about the language. That does not match. Just doesn't match. There's but so far that you can go with that. You're going to handicap yourself. And I'm not saying it's impossible, because there's a lot of people who don't know the language of a culture, but they can give you a they give you some points about the culture. But so that's why I always say handicap yourself, because it doesn't mean it's impossible. I can you can run a marathon and be handicapped. You'll eventually cross the finish line, eventually. But it's more effective if you're in tip top shape and your health is 100%. Then you run the marathon, you're good to go. So what I'm saying is that without studying the language of a culture that you're examining, you will be handicapped. Yeah, you can eventually cross the line, but it's going to be hard and it's silly. Especially in this day and age where we got a lot of information and people could just take their time and read and stuff like that. So anyway, all right. So I want to say Shimon Hotep and Duawu for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to join the Facebook group. Don't forget to, if you're interested in language, contact me. Go to the website. You can register. You can register right now. Get the books. Be on the lookout for future projects. As a group, we're working on future projects for 2018. The grammar book, I am projecting to have that all done and classes ready and ready to go in the beginning of 2018. So I'm gonna take my time with it, what I'm working on right now, and it'll be ready. So those people who already have a fundamental proficiency in the beginner's level, just get ready, because we'll be dealing with the grammar. And the grammar is much more intense than the beginner's level. I'm gonna tell you that right now. It's much more intense. I'm not saying it's hard, but it's more intense and it's more to cover. It's a lot more to cover, all right? But there's a method to this thing, all right? So we're going to make sure that we operating with some good methods. The best method we call Tep Hesed. All right, so with that, I'm going to say Shem Hotep. Anybody, June or Judy, you got anything?
No, I'm good. Shem Hotep.
All right, Shem Hotep.